Chapter 1. The Crimson Clue. The rain fell in relentless sheets across the English countryside, cloaking the rolling hills of Kent in a grey veil that seemed to mourn the fading light of the November afternoon. Hercule Poirot, seated in the plush interior of a chauffeured Rolls-Royce, adjusted his impeccable silk tie and gazed out at the sodden landscape with a faint frown. His neatly waxed mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his distaste for the inclement weather. Yet it was not the rain that occupied his thoughts, but the cryptic letter now resting in his gloved hand, its elegant script smudged by the damp fingers of the postman who had delivered it to his London flat that morning. The letter, penned by Lady Eleanor Ashbourne of Ashbourne Manor, was both urgent and vague, a combination that piqued Poirot's curiosity. "Monsieur Poirot," it began, "your reputation as a man of unparalleled discretion and intellect precedes you. I beseech your assistance in a matter most delicate, one that threatens the very honor of my family. I cannot commit further details to paper, but I implore you to come to Ashbourne Manor at once. Time is of the essence." The signature was firm, yet the ink betrayed a slight tremble, as though the hand that wrote it had been guided by fear. Poirot, ever the connoisseur of human nature, sensed a scandal brewing beneath the polished veneer of aristocratic propriety. He had accepted the invitation without hesitation, not merely out of duty to a distressed lady, but because his little gray cells, as he fondly called them, yearned for a puzzle worthy of their exercise. Thus he found himself en route to Ashbourne Manor, the car's tires slicing through puddles as the grand estate loomed into view. The manor was a vision of Georgian splendor, its honey-colored stone facade defiant against the storm. Ivy clung to its walls, and tall windows glowed faintly, like eyes peering through the mist. As the car crunched to a halt on the gravel drive, Poirot donned his Homburg hat and stepped out, his patent leather shoes gleaming despite the deluge. The butler, a stooped man with a face as weathered as the manor's stones, awaited him beneath the portico. "Monsieur Poirot, I presume?" the butler intoned, his voice as crisp as his starched collar. "I am Harrow, Lady Eleanor's butler. She is expecting you." "Bon," Poirot replied, his Belgian accent lending a musical lilt to the word. "Lead on, Monsieur Harrow. The weather, it is not congenial, and I am most eager to meet the lady of the house." Harrow ushered Poirot into a cavernous hall, where a chandelier cast prisms of light across marble floors. Portraits of stern-faced Ashbournes glowered from the walls, their eyes seeming to follow Poirot as he was led to the drawing-room. There, Lady Eleanor Ashbourne stood before a roaring fire, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her posture regal despite the lines of worry etched into her face. She was a woman of perhaps 60, clad in a deep green gown that spoke of wealth and restraint. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, extending a hand that trembled slightly, "I cannot express my gratitude for your prompt arrival. I feared you might not come." Poirot bowed, kissing her hand with courtly grace. "Madame, when a lady such as yourself calls for Hercule Poirot, he does not tarry. Your letter spoke of a matter most grave. Pray, enlighten me." Lady Eleanor gestured to a velvet upholstered chair, and Poirot sat, his posture as precise as a metronome. She paced before the hearth, her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief. "It is a scandal, Monsieur Poirot, one that could ruin the Ashbourne name. My nephew, Victor Ashbourne, has been entangled in affairs that are, shall we say, unsavory. I had hoped to resolve this quietly, but last night her voice broke, and she turned away, her shoulders trembling. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind already sifting through possibilities. "Madame, you must be precise. What has Monsieur Victor done, and why is it that you summon me with such urgency?" Before she could respond, a piercing scream shattered the silence, echoing from the depths of the manor. Lady Eleanor's face, Blanched and Harrow, who had lingered by the door, stiffened. Poirot rose, his cane tapping the floor with authority. "What is this commotion? We must investigate. Tout de suite." Harrow led the way, his long strides forcing Poirot to quicken his pace. They traversed a maze of corridors, the air growing cooler as they descended a staircase to the manor's library. The heavy oak door stood ajar, and within, a young maid knelt on the Persian rug, her hands covering her face as she sobbed. Beside her, sprawled across the floor, lay the body of a man in his 30s, his evening attire disheveled, a dagger protruding from his chest. Blood pooled beneath him, stark against the rug's intricate patterns. Poirot's gaze swept the scene, taking in every detail: the scattered books on the mahogany desk, the half-empty brandy glass, the open window, admitting a chill breeze. But it was the object clutched in the dead man's hand that arrested his attention. A crimson veil, its silk shimmering in the lamplight, delicate and out of place in the grim tableau. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, kneeling beside the body, with surprising agility for a man of his fastidious nature. "This is Victor Ashbourne, I presume?" Lady Eleanor, who had followed them, nodded mutely, her hand pressed to her lips. Harrow, his composure strained, confirmed, "Yes, sir, Master Victor." Poirot examined the veil, noting its fine weave and the faint scent of jasmine that clung to it. This veil, it is not an ordinary accessory. It is exotic, perhaps from the East, and it carries a perfume most distinctive. "Tell me, madame, do you recognize it?" Lady Eleanor shook her head, her eyes wide with horror. "No, monsieur." "Poirot, I have never seen it before." Victor, he was not one for such things. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign that his mind was already at work. "And yet it is in his hand, gripped as though it were his final thought. This is no accident, madame. This veil, it is the key to the mystery." The maid, still trembling, was gently escorted from the room by Harrow, who promised to summon the local constable. Poirot, left alone with Lady Eleanor, began a meticulous examination of the library. The dagger, he noted, was an ornate piece, its hilt encrusted with emeralds. Family heirloom, perhaps. The window's latch was undone, suggesting an intruder, yet the room bore no signs of a struggle beyond the toppled books. "Madame," Poirot said, turning to Lady Eleanor, "you spoke of a scandal. Was Victor involved in matters that might have invited such a violent end?" She hesitated, her gaze flickering to the veil. Victor was reckless. He gambled, associated with unsavory characters. I feared he was being blackmailed, but he refused to confide in me. I hoped you could uncover the truth before it came to this. Poirot nodded, his expression inscrutable. "And the other members of the household? Who resides here at Ashbourne Manor?" "My son, Sir Reginald Ashbourne, and his wife, Clara," she replied. "There is also Miss Lydia Gray, the governess to their young daughter, and the staff, of course. They are all devoted to the family. But—" She trailed off, her eyes darting to the door. "But you suspect one of them knows more than they admit," Poirot finished, his tone gentle but firm. "Very well, madame. Hercule Poirot will uncover the truth. But first, we must secure this room and await the authorities. The veil, it must remain untouched. It is a clue most vital." As Lady Eleanor nodded, her face a mask of grief and fear, Poirot stepped to the window, peering into the storm-swept night. The rain had erased any footprints, but the open latch suggested an outsider's presence or a clever ruse by someone within. His mind churned, cataloging the details: the veil's perfume, the dagger's opulence, Victor's final grasp. Who had worn the crimson veil, and why had it been left in the hand of a dead man? The library's silence was broken by the distant sound of footsteps, and Poirot turned to see Sir Reginald Ashbourne enter, his face pale beneath a mane of dark hair. "Mother, what is this madness?" he demanded, his voice tight with anger. "Harrow says Victor is dead." "Oui, monsieur," Poirot interjected, stepping forward. "I am Hercule Poirot, and I am here to unravel this tragedy. You are Sir Reginald? Yes? Perhaps you can tell me when you last saw your cousin Victor." Reginald's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. "Last night, at dinner. He was in high spirits, boasting of some venture in London. I retired early and saw him no more." Poirot noted the clipped tone, the avoidance of Victor's name. "And this veil," he said, gesturing to the crimson fabric, "it is familiar to you?" Reginald glanced at it, his expression unreadable. "No, it's not something we'd have here. Looks foreign, garish." "Garish, perhaps," Poirot mused, "but significant. Tell me, monsieur, was Victor a man with enemies?" Reginald hesitated, then shrugged. "He was a fool with money and friends." "Enemies?" "Likely, but I know nothing of this." Poirot inclined his head, sensing the man's reticence. As Reginald turned to console his mother, Poirot's gaze returned to the veil. Its presence was no accident. It was a message, a taunt, or perhaps a mistake. His fingers itched to unravel its secrets, but first he needed to meet the others. In the household, Clara, the vivacious wife; Miss Grey, the secretive governess; and the staff, who saw more than they spoke. The constable arrived, a ruddy-faced man named Inspector Dawes, who regarded Poirot with a mix of awe and suspicion. "Monsieur Poirot, I've heard of you," he said gruffly. "But this is a straightforward case, likely a burglary gone wrong. We'll handle it." Poirot's smile was polite but unyielding. "Inspector, Hercule Poirot does not believe in straightforward cases. This veil, this dagger, this locked manor, they tell a story most complex. I shall assist, with your permission, of course." Dawes grunted, clearly outmatched, and agreed to let Poirot remain. As the room was secured and Victor's body prepared for removal, Poirot took Lady Eleanor aside. "Madame, I will stay at Ashbourne Manor until this matter is resolved. I require a room and the freedom to speak with all who reside here. Is this agreeable?" "Yes, Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, her eyes glistening. "Find who did this to my Victor, please." Poirot bowed, his resolve firm. "Have no fear, madame. The little gray cells of Hercule Poirot are already at work. This crimson veil, it will lead us to the truth." As the storm raged outside, Poirot stood alone in the library, the crimson veil now safely in an evidence bag, its jasmine scent lingering. In his memory, the murder of Victor Ashbourne was no random act. It was a performance, staged with precision and purpose. Who had worn the veil, and why had it been left for him to find? The questions danced in his mind, each a thread in the tapestry of mystery he was determined to unravel. The chapter closed with Poirot's gaze fixed on the storm beyond the window, his thoughts as sharp as the dagger that had ended Victor's. Life. The crimson veil was the key, and he would follow its trail, no matter how dark the path might lead. Chapter 2. The family secrets. The storm had not relented by morning, its relentless drumming against the windows of Ashbourne Manor casting a pall over the household. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed despite the early hour, sat in the dining room, a cup of steaming café au lait before him. His sharp green eyes surveyed the room, noting the polished silver, the heavy damask curtains, and the strained faces of the Ashbourne family as they gathered for breakfast. The air was thick with unspoken tension, each clink of cutlery a punctuation, mark in the silence that followed Victor Ashbourne's murder the previous night. Poirot had slept little, his little gray cells restless with the puzzle of the crimson veil. The silk fabric, now in Inspector Dawes' custody, haunted his thoughts, its jasmine scent, its exotic weave, its incongruous presence in Victor's lifeless hand. Why had it been left behind? Was it a symbol, a signature, or a careless error by the killer? These questions, like the storm outside, demanded answers. Lady Eleanor Ashbourne entered first, her face pale but composed, her black morning gown a stark contrast to the vibrant green she had worn the day before. She nodded to Poirot, her eyes weary but resolute. "Monsieur Poirot, I trust you rested well?" she asked, her voice betraying a tremor of exhaustion. "Rest, madame, is a luxury for those without mysteries to solve," Poirot replied with a small bow. "But I assure you, my mind is most refreshed. I wish to speak with the household today, to understand the life of Monsieur Victor and those who shared it." Before Lady Eleanor could respond, Sir Reginald Ashbourne strode in, his broad shoulders filling the doorway. His dark hair was slicked back, but a shadow of unease lingered in his eyes. Behind him trailed his wife Clara, a vision of elegance in a cream silk dress that clung to her slender frame. Her auburn hair was swept into a low bun, and her smile, though charming, seemed practiced. Lastly, Miss Lydia Gray, the governess, slipped into the room, her plain gray dress and downcast eyes rendering her almost invisible. Yet Poirot's gaze lingered on her, noting the tightness of her lips, the faint tremor in her hands as she took her seat. "Bon," Poirot said, rising with a flourish. "We are all assembled, save for the young Mademoiselle Ashbourne, whom I understand is with her nurse. Let us begin, for time, it does not wait for grief." Sir Reginald's jaw tightened. "Monsieur Poirot, I respect your reputation, but this is a family matter. Victor's death is tragic, but surely the police can handle it." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his amusement at such resistance. "Monsieur, a murder in the heart of a family is never a civil matter. The crimson veil, the dagger, the open window, they speak of secrets, and Hercule Poirot is here to listen. Will you assist, or shall I proceed without your cooperation?" Clara's laugh, light and brittle, broke the tension. "Oh, Reginald, let the man do his work. He's famous after all. Perhaps he'll find something the bumbling Inspector Dawes overlooks." Poirot inclined his head, noting the faint edge in her tone. "Merci, Madame Clara. I shall begin with you altogether to understand the household. Tell me, who was Victor Ashbourne to you, beyond the ties of blood?" Lady Eleanor spoke first, her voice steady but soft. "Victor was my nephew, the son of my late brother. He came to live with us 5 years ago, after his parents' death. He was charming but reckless, always chasing some new venture. I loved him dearly, but he worried me." "Reckless, you say?" Poirot prompted, his eyes narrowing. "In what manner?" "Gambling, mostly," Sir Reginald interjected, his tone clipped. "Victor had a taste for cards and horses, and he wasn't. Always lucky. He'd borrow money, promise to repay, then disappear to London for weeks." Clara's lips curved into a wry smile. "He was a dreamer, Monsieur Poirot, always talking of grand plans, investments, partnerships. But he had a way of making you believe in him, even when you shouldn't." Poirot turned to Miss Gray, who had remained silent, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "And you, Mademoiselle Gray? You saw Victor daily, as governess to the child. What was your impression?" Miss Gray's eyes flicked up, meeting Poirot's briefly before dropping again. "He was kind to little Beatrice," she said quietly. "He'd bring her sweets from London, tell her stories. But he was distracted lately. Troubled, perhaps. Troubled?" Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle but insistent. "In what way, mademoiselle?" She hesitated, her fingers twisting the edge of her napkin. "He seemed anxious. I overheard him arguing with someone on the telephone last week, something about money owed. I didn't pry." Poirot nodded, filing away her words. The breakfast continued, but the atmosphere remained strained, each family member guarded in their responses. Poirot observed their gestures, the way Clara's fingers lingered on her coffee cup, Reginald's frequent glances at the door, Miss Grey's avoidance of eye contact. They were hiding something, each of them, and he intended to uncover it. After breakfast, Poirot requested to see Victor's room, and Harrow, the butler, led him upstairs. The room was a study in contrasts, elegant furnishings marred by disorder, with papers strewn across a walnut desk and a wardrobe half open, revealing a jumble of fine suits. Poirot's meticulous nature recoiled at the chaos, but he set to work, examining every detail with the precision of a watchmaker. He began with the desk, sifting through receipts, racing forms, and letters. One envelope, tucked beneath a pile of unpaid bills, caught his eye. It was addressed to Victor in a flowing feminine hand, with no return address. Poirot opened it carefully, revealing a single sheet of paper. "My dearest Victor, I cannot bear this secrecy any longer. Meet me at the usual place, midnight, tomorrow. We must decide our future, or all is lost. Yours forever." C. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he read the letter. A forbidden romance, perhaps, he murmured to himself. But who is this C? Clara, perhaps, or another? And why such urgency? He pocketed the letter, intending to show it to Inspector Dawes later, and continued his search. The wardrobe yielded little beyond expensive clothing, but a small leather-bound notebook hidden in a shoe caught his attention. Its pages were filled with cryptic entries, dates, initials, and sums of money, suggesting debts or transactions. One entry, dated a week prior, read, "R. Demands repayment. No more delays." R, Poirot mused. Reginald, perhaps? Or another player in this drama? As he explored further, Poirot noticed a faint scent of jasmine lingering in the room, the same as the crimson veil. He traced it to a velvet-lined box on the dresser, empty save for a single silk thread, crimson and delicate. The veil was here, he concluded, or something very like it. But why remove it, only to leave it with the body? His inspection was interrupted by a soft knock. Miss Grey stood in the doorway, her face pale. "Monsieur Poirot, lady. Eleanor asked me to check on you. Do you need assistance?" Poirot smiled, sensing an opportunity. "Mademoiselle, your presence is most welcome. Tell me, did Victor ever speak of a woman in his life? A romance, perhaps, that caused him distress?" Miss Grey's cheeks flushed, and she looked away. He mentioned someone once, in passing. A lady he met in London, someone he cared for deeply. But he said it was complicated, that it could never be. Complicated, you say? Poirot's voice was soft, encouraging. And did he mention a name, or perhaps a letter? A C, for example? Her eyes widened briefly, then narrowed. "No, nothing like that. I shouldn't have said anything. I must go. Beatrice needs me." She fled before Poirot could press further, but her reaction confirmed his suspicions. She knew more than she admitted. He returned to the desk, his mind racing. The letter, the notebook, the jasmine scent, all pointed to a web of secrets entwining Victor's life. But whose secrets, and how had they led to murder? Poirot descended to the drawing-room, where Clara was arranging flowers, her movements graceful but tense. "Madame Clara," he began, "I have found something curious in Victor's room. A letter, signed with the initial C. It speaks of a secret meeting, a matter of great urgency. Can you enlighten me?" Clara's hand froze mid-motion, a rose trembling in her grasp. "A letter? I know nothing of it, Monsieur Poirot. Victor was always scribbling notes. It could be anyone." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "And the scent of jasmine, madame? It is a perfume most distinctive, and I believe you favor it. Was it not your perfume that lingered on the crimson veil?" Clara's laugh was sharp, almost a bark. Jasmine? Half the women in London wear it, monsieur. You're barking up the wrong tree if you think I had anything to do with Victor's death. Perhaps, Poirot said, his tone neutral. But the truth, madame, it has a way of revealing itself. I shall speak with Sir Reginald next. He found Reginald in the study, poring over ledgers with a scowl. Monsieur Poirot, this is a bad business, Reginald said without preamble. Victor's death has upset Mother terribly, and now you're poking about, stirring things up. Stirring, monsieur, is necessary to uncover the truth, Poirot replied. I have found a notebook in Victor's room, suggesting he owed money to someone with the initial R. Would you care to explain? Reginald's face darkened. Victor was always in debt. If he wrote R, it could mean anything, some bookmaker, some creditor. I lent him money once or twice, but on no fool. I stopped when he couldn't repay. Poirot nodded, noting the defensiveness in Reginald's tone. And last night, where were you after dinner? In here, working, Reginald snapped. Ask Harrow if you don't believe me. I shall, Poirot said, rising. And a crimson veil, monsieur? It is not something you recognize? Never seen it before, Reginald said curtly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. Poirot left the study, his mind cataloguing the inconsistencies. Reginald's alibi was shaky, Clara's denial too quick, and Miss Grey's nervousness betrayed hidden knowledge. He sought out Harrow, who confirmed Reginald's claim of being in the study, but admitted he hadn't checked after 10 o'clock. Master Victor was in the library then, sir, Harrow added. I brought him brandy, and he seemed agitated. Agitated, you say? Poirot pressed. In what manner? Harrow hesitated. He was pacing, muttering about someone betraying him. I didn't catch the name, but he said, she'll regret this. She? Poirot repeated, his eyes gleaming. Merci, Monsieur Harrow. You have been most helpful. As the day wore on, Poirot returned to Victor's room, determined to find one final clue before nightfall. He examined the fireplace, noticing a faint smudge of ash on the hearth. Kneeling, he sifted through the cinders and found a partially burned scrap of paper, its edges charred but legible. It read, Meet me at midnight, or I tell all. Poirot's heart quickened. Another note, this one threatening, and again signed C. He tucked it into his pocket, his mind racing. The letter, the notebook, the jasmine scent, and now this burned note all pointed to a woman, possibly Clara, but perhaps another. The crimson veil, he sensed, was the thread that would tie these clues together. As evening fell, Poirot stood by the library window, the storm still raging outside. The household was a nest of secrets, each member guarding their own. Clara's charm, Reginald's anger, Miss Grey's reticence, they were pieces of a puzzle, and the crimson veil was its heart. Who was C, and what had Victor known that led to his death? The chapter closed with Poirot clutching the burned note, his eyes fixed on the darkened gardens beyond. The truth was close, but it would require all his cunning to unravel the secrets hidden within Ashbourne Manor. Chapter 3. The midnight visitor, the storm that had battered Ashbourne Manor for 2 days, showed no sign of abating, its howling winds rattling the windows as if demanding entry. Hercule Poirot stood in the library where Victor Ashbourne had met. His end, his gloved hands clasped behind his back, his sharp green eyes scanning the room. The crimson veil, now in the custody of Inspector Dawes, lingered in his mind like a melody he could not shake. Its jasmine scent, its exotic silk, its deliberate placement in Victor's hand. These were not accidents, but pieces of a puzzle designed to taunt or mislead. The burned note he had found in Victor's room, signed C and threatening exposure, only deepened the enigma. Who was this C, and what had Victor known that warranted such a deadly response? Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of Harrow, the butler, whose stoic demeanor had begun to crack under the weight of the tragedy. "Monsieur Poirot," Harrow said, his voice low, "Inspector Dawes has sent word. He's delayed by the storm, but will return tomorrow to continue the investigation. He asks that nothing be disturbed." "Bon," Poirot replied, his mustache twitching with a hint of amusement. "The good inspector, he is thorough, but he lacks the imagination. Tell me, Monsieur Harrow, you mentioned last night that Victor was agitated when you brought him brandy. Did you see or hear anything else that evening? A visitor, perhaps, or an unusual sound?" Harrow's brow furrowed, his hands smoothing his waistcoat as if to steady himself. "Now that you mention it, sir, there was something. Around 11 o'clock, as I was locking up, I heard the front door creak. I thought it was the wind, but when I checked, it was slightly ajar. I assumed Master Victor had gone out, but he was still in the library when I brought the brandy at 1:30. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A door left ajar, in a storm such as this? Most curious. And you saw no one?" "No, sir," Harrow said, shaking his head. "But the grounds were dark, and the rain was fierce. Someone could have slipped in unnoticed." "Or out," Poirot mused, his gaze drifting to the open window where the rain still pattered against the sill. "Merci, Monsieur Harrow. You have given me much to consider." As Harrow departed, Poirot turned his attention to the window, its latch still unfastened, as it had been the night of the murder. He leaned out, heedless of the rain that dampened his impeccable suit, and examined the ground below. The storm had turned the garden into a quagmire, erasing any hope of clear footprints, but Poirot's keen eye caught a faint indentation in the mud beneath the ivy-covered wall, a scuff, perhaps where someone had climbed or stumbled. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "an intruder or a clever ruse? The little gray cells, they must work harder." Determined to uncover more, Poirot sought out the groundskeeper, a grizzled man named Tompkins, who lived in a cottage at the edge of the estate. The rain had slackened to a drizzle as Poirot, umbrella in hand, made his way across the sodden lawn. Tompkins, a man of few words with a face like weathered oak, was mending a fence when Poirot approached. "Monsieur Tompkins," Poirot began, his voice cutting through the patter of rain, "you are the guardian of these grounds. Tell me, did you see anything unusual the night of Victor Ashbourne's death? A stranger, perhaps, or a figure near the manor?" Tompkins paused, wiping his brow with a calloused hand. "Aye, sir, now you mention it. I did see summat. 'Bout midnight, I was checking the stables horses get nervy in storms, you see. I saw a figure, cloaked-like, moving toward the manor from the woods. Couldn't see their face, mind, but they was quick, like they didn't want to be seen." Poirot's heart quickened. "A cloaked figure, you say? Male or female? Could you tell?" Tompkins scratched his chin. "Hard to say, sir. They was bundled up against the rain, but the cloak was dark, maybe black. Moved light, though, like they knew the grounds." "And this figure, it approached the library window?" Poirot pressed, gesturing toward the manor. "Aye, near enough." Tompkins said, "I thought it queer, but with the storm, I didn't linger. Figured it was one of the family, maybe Master Victor himself." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. A cloaked figure at midnight, the ajar front door, the open window, these were no coincidences. "Merci, Monsieur Tompkins. You have been most helpful. If you recall anything else, you will inform me, yes?" Tompkins grunted his assent, and Poirot returned to the manor, his shoes muddied, but his resolve unshaken. The library was his next destination, where he examined the window with renewed focus. The sill bore faint scratches, barely visible, as if something metal a tool, perhaps had been used to pry it open. The mud outside, though churned by the rain, held a single clear imprint, a narrow heel, Too small for a man's boot, but too heavy for a lady's slipper. Poirot crouched, sketching the mark in his notebook with meticulous care. This heel, he said to himself, it is neither wholly masculine nor feminine. A clue most tantalizing. Back inside, Poirot sought out Lady Eleanor, who was in the drawing-room, staring into the fire as if seeking answers in its flames. "Madame," he said gently, "I have learned of a visitor to the manor the night. Of Victor's death, a cloaked figure seen near the library. Does this spark any recognition?" Lady Eleanor's hand tightened on her handkerchief. "A visitor? No, Monsieur Poirot. We had no guests that night. Victor was alone, or so I thought. Could it have been a thief?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone non-committal. "But the crimson veil suggests otherwise. Tell me, madame, was Victor expecting anyone? A friend, a creditor, perhaps a woman?" Her eyes flickered with unease. "He mentioned no one, but Victor was secretive. He'd been in London the week before, meeting with people he wouldn't name. I feared he was in trouble debts, or worse." Poirot nodded, filing away her words. "And the household, madame? Were all accounted for that night?" "As far as I know," she said, her voice faltering. Reginald was in his study, Clara retired early, and Miss Grey was with Beatrice. The staff were in their quarters, except for Harrow, who locks up. "On," Poirot said, rising. "I must speak with the others again. The truth, it hides in the shadows, but Hercule Poirot will bring it to light." His next conversation was with Clara, whom he found in the conservatory, tending to an array of orchids. Her cream dress was now stained with soil, and her auburn hair had loosened, framing her face in soft waves. She smiled as Poirot approached, but her eyes were wary. "Madame Clara," Poirot began, "I have learned of a cloaked figure seen near the manor at midnight, the night of Victor's death. You retired early, yes? Did you hear or see anything unusual?" Clara's fingers paused on an orchid stem. "A cloaked figure? How Gothic, Monsieur Poirot." "No, I was asleep by 10. The storm kept me awake for a while, but I heard nothing out of the ordinary." "And yet," Poirot said, his voice soft but piercing, "the library window was opened. From the outside, someone entered or left, and left behind the crimson veil. You are certain you know nothing of it?" Her smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. "As I told you, I don't own such a thing. Perhaps it belonged to one of Victor's London friends. He was always mixing with colorful characters." Poirot's gaze lingered on her, noting the slight flush in her cheeks. "Perhaps, madame, but the jasmine scent, it is most distinctive. I shall keep this in mind." Leaving Clara to her orchids, Poirot sought out Sir Reginald, who was in the billiard room, idly striking balls across the green felt. His mood was darker than the previous day, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep or something stronger. "Monsieur Reginald," Poirot said, "a cloaked figure was seen near the manor at midnight. Your alibi, it is that you were in your study. Can anyone confirm this?" Reginald's cue struck the ball with a sharp crack. "I told you, I was working. Harrow saw me there earlier. I don't keep a diary of my movements, Poirot." "And yet," Poirot said, undeterred, "the door was found ajar, the window open. Someone entered the manor, and Victor died. If you know of anyone who might have visited, it is best to speak now." Reginald's jaw tightened. Victor had enemies, creditors, gamblers, women. Any of them could have come sneaking about. "I don't know, and I don't care to guess." Poirot nodded, sensing the man's defensiveness was a shield. "Very. Well, monsieur, but the truth, it cannot be hidden forever." His final interview was with Miss Lydia Grey, whom he found in the nursery, reading to young Beatrice. The child's presence necessitated caution, so Poirot waited until Beatrice was distracted by a doll before speaking softly. "Mademoiselle Grey, A figure was seen near the manor at midnight. You were with the child? Yes. But did you hear anything at the door? A voice, perhaps. Miss Grey's hands trembled as she closed the book. I was here, Monsieur Poirot. Beatrice was restless, so I stayed with her. I heard the storm, nothing else. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And yet you seem troubled, mademoiselle. If you know something, even a small detail, it may save another life. Her lips parted, then closed. I heard nothing, she whispered, but her eyes betrayed her, darting to the window as if expecting to see the cloaked figure there. Poirot left the nursery, his mind a whirl of possibilities. The cloaked figure, the heel mark, the open window all pointed to an outsider, yet the crimson veil suggested a connection to the household. He returned to the library, where he examined the rug near the window, finding a single damp leaf, its edges curled from the rain. It was from a yew tree, common in the manor's gardens but not near the library. Someone had carried it in, perhaps. On their cloak dot as evening fell, Poirot stood by the library window, the storm's fury unabated. The cloaked figure was the key to the next piece of the puzzle, and he suspected they had worn the crimson veil. Was it C, the author of the threatening note? Or was it someone else, using the veil to mislead? The heel mark suggested a woman, yet the groundskeeper's description hinted at ambiguity. Poirot's fingers traced the window scratches, his mind piecing together the fragments. The chapter closed with Poirot clutching the damp leaf, his eyes fixed on the darkened gardens. A midnight visitor had left their mark, and he was determined to follow it, no matter where it led. The crimson veil, he knew, was more than a clue. It was a challenge, and Hercule Poirot never refused a challenge. Chapter 4. The Perfume's Trail. The storm that had besieged Ashbourne Manor for 3 days had finally begun to relent, leaving behind a drizzle that tapped lightly against the windows, like the tentative fingers of a ghost. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand hall of the manor, his polished shoes gleaming against the marble floor, his mind as sharp as the emerald-encrusted dagger that had ended Victor Ashbourne's life. The crimson veil, with its haunting jasmine scent, remained the enigma at the heart of the mystery. The cloaked figure seen at midnight, the heel mark by the library window, the threatening note signed C, all were threads in a tapestry Poirot was determined to unravel. But it was the perfume, delicate yet unmistakable, that now guided his investigation, a scent that seemed to linger in the very air of the manor. Poirot had spent the morning reviewing his notes, the cryptic letter from C and the burned note foremost in his thoughts. The jasmine scent, he was certain, was no coincidence. It linked the veil to someone within the household, or someone who had been close to Victor. His suspicions rested heavily on Clara Ashbourne, whose charm and quick denials had only sharpened his curiosity. Her claim that jasmine was a common perfume rang hollow. The veil's scent was too distinct, too rare, to be dismissed so easily. As the clock struck 11, Poirot made his way to the conservatory, where Clara was known to spend her mornings. The glass-walled room was a jungle of greenery, its air heavy with the scent of orchids and damp earth. Clara stood by a table, pruning a delicate fern, her cream dress now replaced by a soft lavender gown that accentuated her auburn hair. She looked up as Poirot entered, her smile as polished as the silver shears in her hand. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice light but guarded, "you're becoming a fixture here. Have you solved our little mystery yet?" Poirot inclined his head, his mustache twitching with a hint of amusement. "Madame Clara, a mystery is not a little thing, especially when it involves murder. I come to speak of the crimson veil, and more precisely, its perfume. A jasmine, it is most distinctive, non? You told me you wear such a scent. May I ask where you procure it?" Clara's fingers paused, the shears hovering over a leaf. "I told you, monsieur, jasmine is common. I buy my perfume in London, at a little shop in Mayfair. But I assure you, I've never owned a crimson veil. It's far too theatrical for my taste." "Theatrical, perhaps," Poirot said, his eyes narrowing, "but significant. The veil was found in Victor's hand, and its scent matches the perfume you favor. This is no coincidence, madame. May I see your perfume collection? It would assist Hercule Poirot in eliminating possibilities." Clara's smile tightened, but she nodded. "Very well, monsieur. Follow me." She led him upstairs to her private boudoir, a room of understated elegance with rosewood furniture and silk drapes. On a mirrored dressing table stood an array of vin, perfume bottles, their crystal facets catching the morning light. Poirot examined them with care, lifting each to inhale its scent. Most were floral or citrus, but one bottle, a slender vial with a silver stopper, caught his attention. He uncorked it, and the unmistakable aroma of jasmine filled the air, rich and heady, identical to the veil's scent. "This, madame," Poirot said, holding up the vial, "is the perfume of the crimson veil. It is not common, as you claim. This is a bespoke blend, is it not? From a perfumery of great repute?" Clara's cheeks flushed, but her voice remained steady. "It's from Duval's in Paris, if you must know. I had it made last year, but I'm hardly the only woman who wears it, Monsieur Poirot. You're chasing shadows." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "Shadows, madame, often conceal the truth. Tell me, do you keep other items in this room that might shed light on Victor's final hours? A box, perhaps, where you store personal effects?" Clara's eyes flickered to a small rosewood chest on the dressing table, its lock gleaming in. The light. "My jewelry box? It's private, monsieur. Nothing in there concerns Victor or his death." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone gentle but firm, "but I must insist. The little gray cells, they tell me this box may hold a clue. Will you open it, or shall I ask Inspector Dawes to do so?" Clara hesitated, her fingers brushing the chest's derbyshire. "You're relentless, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice sharp. "Very well, but this is absurd." She produced a small key from a drawer and unlocked the chest, revealing a collection of glittering necklaces, rings, and earrings. Poirot's eyes scanned the contents, but nothing immediately stood out, no crimson veil, no incriminating letters. Yet the act of opening the box had been reluctant, and Poirot sensed Clara's unease. "Merci, madame," he said, closing the chest gently. "You have been most cooperative. But tell me, did Victor ever borrow this perfume, or perhaps give it to someone? A lady friend, perhaps?" Clara's laugh was brittle. "Victor? He wasn't the sort to notice perfume, let alone borrow it. He was too busy with his gambling and schemes." Poirot nodded, unconvinced. And yet the jasmine scent was on the veil in his hand. A curious detail, non? Clara turned away, busying herself with a hairpin. "I can't help you, monsieur. Perhaps you should ask someone else." Poirot bowed and left the room, his mind racing. The perfume was no coincidence, and Clara's guarded demeanor suggested she knew more than she admitted. The locked box, though revealing no direct evidence, was a sign of her secrecy. He needed to dig deeper, but first he sought out Harrow, who was polishing silver in the pantry. "Monsieur Harrow," Poirot said, "you mentioned Victor's agitation the night of his death. Did he ever speak of a woman, perhaps one who wore jasmine perfume?" Harrow paused, his cloth stilling. "Not directly, sir. But a few weeks ago, he received a telephone call from a lady. I overheard him say, 'You can't keep doing this.' To me, the voice was faint, but it was a woman's, cultured, not a servant." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And this lady, did she visit the manor?" "Not that I know, sir," Harrow said. "But Master Victor often went to London to meet people. He'd come back smelling of perfume, sometimes jasmine, now that you mention it. Merci, Monsieur Harrow. Poirot said, his mind cataloging the information. The jasmine scent was a thread connecting Victor to someone, possibly C. And Clara's perfume was the strongest link yet. But was she the cloaked figure, or was someone else involved? Poirot's next stop was the library, where he examined the scene of the crime once more. The open window, the scratches on the sill, the damp leaf from a yew tree all pointed to an intruder, yet the veil suggested an intimate connection. He knelt by the rug, searching for overlooked clues, and noticed a faint smudge of wax near the window. It was candle wax, white and hardened, as if a candle had been held there briefly. A midnight visitor, cloaked and cautious, perhaps using a candle to navigate the dark? He stepped outside, braving the drizzle, to inspect the garden again. The heel mark he had found the previous day was now blurred by the rain, but he traced its path to a low wall, where he found a snagged thread of dark wool, possibly from a cloak. He tucked it into an evidence envelope, his thoughts racing. The cloaked figure had climbed the wall, entered through the window, and left the vale. But why? Returning to the manor, Poirot sought out Miss Lydia Gray, hoping her quiet observance might yield more clues. He found her in the schoolroom, teaching Beatrice arithmetic. The child's presence required discretion, so Poirot waited until Beatrice was sent to fetch a book before speaking. "Mademoiselle Gray," he said softly, "you mentioned Victor's troubled state. Did he ever speak of a woman associated with jasmine perfume, or perhaps a crimson veil?" Miss Gray's hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "No, monsieur. He was private about his personal life. But I once saw him with a woman in the village, a month ago. She was elegant, with auburn hair, and I smelled jasmine when I passed by." Poirot's heart quickened. "Auburn hair, Clara? And this woman, did you see her face?" "No," Miss Gray said, looking away. "It was dark, and I was in a hurry. I shouldn't have mentioned it." Poirot thanked her and left, his mind buzzing. The description matched Clara, yet Miss Gray's hesitation suggested she was holding back. Was she protecting someone, or afraid? He needed to confront Clara again, but first he returned to her boudoir, where she was now brushing her hair before a mirror. "Madame Clara," he said, his tone deceptively mild, "I have learned that Victor was seen with a woman of your description, smelling of jasmine, in the village. This woman, was it you?" Clara's brush froze, her eyes meeting his in the mirror. "Monsieur Poirot, you're relentless. Yes, I met Victor in the village once, to discuss family matters, but that's all. No veils, no secrets. And yet," Poirot said, "the jasmine scent persists. I must ask you to open the jewelry box again, madame. There may be something I overlooked." Clara's face hardened, but she complied, unlocking the chest with a sharp click. Poirot examined it closely, noticing a velvet lining with a faint indentation, as if something small and flat had been removed. "Something is missing, madame," he said. "A letter, perhaps? Or something more incriminating." "You're grasping at straws," Clara snapped, slamming the chest shut. "I've had enough of your accusations." Poirot bowed, unfazed. "The truth, madame. It will emerge. It always does." As he left the room, Poirot's mind churned. The empty space in the box, the jasmine perfume, the cloaked figure all pointed to Clara, yet the evidence was circumstantial. The burned note signed C suggested a connection, but was it too obvious? He needed to find the cloaked figure, and the perfume was his guide. The chapter closed with Poirot standing in the hall, the wool thread from the cloak in his hand, the scent of jasmine lingering in his memory. Clara's denials were crumbling, but the truth remained elusive. The crimson veil, he knew, was a beacon in the fog, and he would follow its perfume to the heart of the mystery. Chapter 5. The Governess's Confession. Drizzle that had softened the storm's fury over Ashbourne Manor had given way to a brittle November sunlight. casting long shadows across the estate's manicured lawns. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, his gloved hands tracing the scratches on the windowsill where the cloaked figure had entered 4 nights prior. The crimson veil, with its intoxicating jasmine scent, remained the linchpin of the mystery surrounding Victor Ashbourne's murder. The heel mark in the mud, the wool thread from a cloak, the burned note signed C, and Clara's reluctant opening of her locked jewelry box, all were fragments of a puzzle that Poirot's little gray cells were piecing together with relentless precision. Yet the truth remained elusive, hidden behind the guarded faces of the manor's inhabitants. Poirot's suspicions had lingered on Clara Ashbourne, whose jasmine perfume matched the veil's scent and whose evasion suggested deeper secrets. But another figure had begun to intrigue him, Miss Lydia Gray, the governess, whose quiet demeanor and nervous glances betrayed knowledge she dared not voice. Her mention of seeing Victor with an auburn-haired woman smelling of jasmine, possibly. Clara had been hesitant, as if she feared the consequences of her words. Poirot sensed that Miss Gray held a key to the mystery, and he resolved to draw it from her with the gentle persistence for which he was renowned. He found her in the schoolroom, where young Beatrice Ashbourne was practicing her penmanship, her small tongue protruding in concentration. Miss Gray sat beside her, correcting a misspelled word with a patience that contrasted with the tension in her posture. Poirot waited until Beatrice was absorbed in her task before approaching, his cane tapping softly on the polished floor. "Mademoiselle Gray," he said, his voice low and soothing, "a moment of your time, if you please. The matter of Victor Ashbourne's death weighs heavily on this household, and I believe you know more than you have shared. Will you not confide in Hercule Poirot, who seeks only the truth?" Miss Gray's hand froze, the quill trembling above the page. Her gray eyes, usually so guarded, met his briefly, revealing a flicker of fear. "Monsieur Poirot, I've told you all I know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I saw Victor with a woman in the village, but I don't know who she was." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his gentle skepticism. "Mademoiselle, your hesitation speaks louder than your words. You are a woman of observation, non? You see much in this household, perhaps more than others realize. Tell me, what did you overhear or witness that troubles you so?" Beatrice looked up, sensing the shift in tone, and Miss Gray quickly sent her to fetch a new ink bottle from the cupboard. As the child scampered away, Miss Gray's shoulders slumped, as if the weight of her silence had become unbearable. "Monsieur Poirot," she began, her voice trembling, "I didn't want to speak ill of anyone, but I overheard something the night before Victor's death. It was late, and I was passing the study. Victor was arguing with Sir Reginald, quite heatedly." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "An argument, you say? About what, precisely?" Miss Gray clasped her hands, her knuckles whitening. "Money, I think. Victor was saying something about a debt, that Reginald had no right to demand repayment so soon. Reginald was furious, saying Victor had disgraced the family and that he'd regret his actions. I didn't stay long. I felt it wasn't my place to listen." Poirot's mind raced, recalling the notebook in Victor's room with the entry R. Demands repayment. No more delays. "This is most significant, mademoiselle," he said. "And you are certain it was Sir Reginald?" "Yes," she said, nodding. I recognized his voice, sharp and commanding. Victor sounded desperate, almost pleading. Poirot's gaze softened, sensing her distress. "And there is more, non? Something else you have seen or heard, perhaps concerning the crimson veil?" Miss Gray's breath caught, and she looked away, her fingers twisting the edge of her sleeve. I shouldn't say. It's not my place to accuse anyone." "Mademoiselle," Poirot said, his tone firm yet kind, "a man is dead, and the truth is the only path to justice." Speak, and let Hercule Poirot judge what is relevant." She hesitated, then spoke in a rush, as if unburdening herself of a secret too heavy to bear. "A few weeks ago, I saw Clara Mrs. Ashbourne with a crimson veil. It was in the drawing-room, late at night. She was holding it, stroking it, as if it meant something to her. I thought it odd, but I didn't ask. Then, when you found the veil with Victor, I remembered it, and I wondered if it was the same." Poirot's heart quickened, his suspicions about Clara reignited. A crimson veil in Clara's possession? "You are certain of this, mademoiselle?" "Yes," Miss Grey said, her voice steadier now. "It was silk, bright red, just like the one you described, but I don't know if it's the same. I didn't want to cause trouble." Poirot placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "You have done well, mademoiselle. This is a clue most vital. You must not fear Hercule Poirot will protect your confidence." Beatrice returned with the ink bottle, ending the conversation, and Poirot thanked Miss Grey before leaving the schoolroom. His mind was a whirl of possibilities. Clara's denial of owning the veil was now contradicted by Miss Grey's testimony, and the argument between Victor and Reginald suggested a financial motive for murder. The jasmine perfume, the locked box, the cloaked figure, all were threads converging on Clara, yet Miss Grey's confession hinted at a broader conspiracy within the household. Determined to pursue this new lead, Poirot sought out Clara, but she was not in the conservatory or her boudoir. Instead, he encountered Harrow in the hall, polishing a brass candelabrum with methodical care. "Monsieur Harrow," Poirot said, "do you know where I might find Madame Clara?" "She's gone to the village, sir," Harrow replied. "Said she needed to post a letter. She took the car about an hour ago." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A sudden errand, just as he was closing in on her?" "Merci, monsieur. And tell me, have you ever seen Madame Clara with a crimson veil, perhaps?" "In the drawing-room?" Harrow paused, his cloth stilling. "A crimson veil? No, sir, not that I recall. But Mrs. Ashbourne is fond of fine things, scarves, shawls. She's got a whole collection in her wardrobe." Poirot nodded, filing away the information. "And Sir Reginald, where is he now?" "In his study, sir," Harrow said. "He's been there all morning, going over papers." Poirot made his way to the study, but before confronting Reginald, he decided to revisit Victor's room, hoping to find further evidence linking Clara to the veil. The room was as he had left it, its disorder a stark contrast to Poirot's own fastidious nature. He examined the velvet-lined box on the dresser, where he had found a crimson silk thread, and noticed a faint scratch on its lock, as if it had been forced open recently. Had someone removed something, a veil, perhaps, or another clue? As he searched the wardrobe, Poirot's fingers brushed against a loose panel in the back. With a gentle tug, it came free, revealing a small compartment. Inside was a torn photograph, its edges jagged as if ripped in haste. The image showed Clara, her auburn hair unmistakable, standing beside a man whose face was obscured by the tear. The man's arm was around her waist, suggesting intimacy, and Clara's smile was radiant, unlike the guarded expression she wore now. On the back of the photograph, in a looping script, were the words, "To my darling, forever yours." Poirot's breath caught. "Mon Dieu," he murmured. "A lover, perhaps? But who is this man? And why was the photograph hidden?" He tucked the photograph into his pocket, his mind racing. The torn image, combined with Miss Grey's confession, painted Clara as a woman with secrets. Perhaps a secret lover, perhaps a motive for murder. The crimson veil seen in her possession was a damning clue, yet Poirot sensed the puzzle was not yet complete. Was Clara C. the author of the threatening note, or was someone using her perfume and veil to frame her? Returning downstairs, Poirot found Sir Reginald in his study, his desk littered with ledgers and correspondence. Reginald looked up, his face etched with irritation. "Monsieur Poirot, what now?" "I'm trying to keep this estate afloat while you play detective." Poirot's smile was polite but unyielding. "Monsieur Reginald, I have learned of an argument between you and Victor the night before his death. A matter of money, yes? You demanded repayment of a debt, and he was desperate. Care to explain?" Reginald's jaw tightened, his pen snapping. In his hand, "Eavesdropping servants, is it?" "Yes, I argued with Victor. He owed me thousands, squandered on gambling and bad investments. I told him I'd cut him off if he didn't pay up. But I didn't kill him, Poirot." "And yet," Poirot said, his voice soft but piercing, "your anger was great, non? And the crimson veil, did you ever see it in Victor's possession? Or perhaps with Madame Clara?" Reginald's eyes narrowed. "Clara? What's she got? To do with it? No, I've never seen that damned veil. You're barking up the wrong tree." Poirot inclined his head, sensing Reginald's defensiveness was more than financial concern. "We shall see, monsieur. The truth, it has a way of revealing itself." As he left the study, Poirot's thoughts returned to the photograph. The man with Clara, could he be C, or was he another player in this drama? The crimson veil, seen by Miss Grey in Clara's hands, contradicted her denials, and the jasmine perfume tied her to the crime scene. Yet Miss Grey's confession about the argument suggested Reginald had a motive too. The household was a nest of secrets, and Poirot was determined to untangle them. The chapter closed with Poirot standing in the hall, the torn photograph in his hand, its cryptic inscription burning in his memory. The governess's confession had opened new doors, but each led to more questions. Who was the man in the photograph, and how was he connected to the crimson veil? The truth was close, and Poirot's little gray cells were ready to seize it. Chapter 6. The stranger in the village. The November sun, though weak, had burned away the last vestiges of the storm, leaving Ashbourne Manor bathed in a pale golden light that belied the darkness within its walls. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of the manor's gravel drive, his Homburg hat tilted precisely, his cane tapping rhythmically as he gazed toward the village of Ashbourne, nestled in the valley below. The crimson veil, with its haunting jasmine scent, remained the heart of the mystery surrounding Victor Ashbourne's murder, but new clues had shifted Poirot's focus outward. The torn photograph of Clara with an unknown man, Miss Lydia Gray's confession about Clara's possession of a crimson veil, and the argument between Victor and Sir Reginald all pointed to secrets within the household, yet the cloaked figure, seen at midnight, suggested an outsider's involvement. Poirot's little gray cells were restless, urging him to seek answers beyond the manor's confines. The photograph, with its cryptic inscription, "To my darling, forever yours," had ignited Poirot's curiosity. Who was the man beside Clara, and was he the C of the threatening note found in Victor's room? The jasmine perfume, matching Clara's bespoke blend from Duval's in Paris, tied her to the veil, but Miss Gray's revelation that Clara had held a similar veil weeks earlier contradicted her denials. Poirot suspected Clara was hiding a lover, perhaps the cloaked figure, and the village, where Victor had been seen with an auburn-haired woman, was the next logical step in his investigation. Poirot set out for the village, declining the offer of a car to better observe the surroundings. The path wound through frost-kissed meadows, the air sharp with the scent of damp earth and wood smoke. Ashbourne was a quaint hamlet, its stone cottages clustered around a medieval church, their chimneys puffing lazily into the sky. The villagers, accustomed to the comings and goings of the manor's residents, eyed Poirot with curiosity as he entered the Rose and Crown, the local inn and the heart of village gossip. The innkeeper, a stout woman named Mrs. Baxter, with a face as round as her apple pies, greeted him with a wary smile. "Good day, sir," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "You're that detective fellow staying at the manor, aren't you? Terrible business about young Mr. Victor." "Oui, Madame Baxter," Poirot replied, removing his hat with a flourish. "I am Hercule Poirot, and I seek to bring justice to this tragedy. Tell me, have you heard talk in the village of a stranger, perhaps someone who arrived shortly before Victor's death?" Mrs. Baxter's eyes narrowed, but her tone was eager. "Well, now, there's been a bit of chatter about a gentleman who took a room here last week. Calls himself Julien Moreau, a Frenchman, or so he says. Charming as you please, but he kept to himself. Asking questions about the Ashbourne family, nothing overt. Mind, just casual-like." Poirot's heart quickened. A Frenchman, or someone claiming to be. This Monsieur Moreau. Describe him, s'il vous plaît. Tall, dark hair, a bit of a rogue's smile, Mrs. Baxter said, leaning closer. Wore a fine coat, black wool, and smoked those fancy cigarettes with gold tips. He left yesterday, sudden-like, said he had business in London. Poirot's mind raced, recalling the wool thread from a dark cloak found near the library window. And did Monsieur Moreau ever meet with anyone from the manor? Victor, perhaps, or Madame Clara. Mrs. Baxter hesitated, glancing around the empty tap-room. "Not that I saw, but he was out at odd hours, especially at night. One of my maids, Jenny, said she saw him near the manor's gates a few nights back, cloaked against the rain. Could have been the storm playing tricks, but she swore it was him." "Cloaked, you say?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Most interesting. May I see the room Monsieur Moreau occupied?" Mrs. Baxter led him upstairs to a small but tidy room overlooking the village green. The bed was made, the wardrobe empty, but Poirot's meticulous eye caught a faint glint beneath the dresser. Kneeling with surprising agility, he retrieved a cigarette butt, its gold tip gleaming. The scent of tobacco was faint, overlaid with a hint of Jasmine Clara's perfume. Or a deliberate echo? "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, tucking the cigarette into an evidence envelope. "This Moreau, he is no phantom. But why the jasmine?" He searched the room further, finding a scrap of paper wedged in a floorboard. It was a train ticket stub, dated the day of Victor's murder, for a journey from London to Ashbourne. The name J. Moreau was scrawled in a hurried hand. Poirot pocketed it, his thoughts churning. Had Moreau been the cloaked figure, slipping into the manor at midnight? And why had he left so abruptly? Thanking Mrs. Baxter, Poirot left the inn and wandered the village, seeking more whispers about Moreau. At the post office, the elderly clerk, Mr. Finch, recalled Moreau sending a telegram to London, addressed to a C. Duval. Poirot's pulse quickened. Duval, the Parisian perfumery that crafted Clara's jasmine scent. Or was C. someone else, perhaps the author of the threatening note? "Tell me, Monsieur Finch," Poirot said, "did this Moreau mention the Ashbourne family?" "Not directly," Finch said, adjusting his spectacles. "But he asked about the manor's layout, casual-like, as if he were curious about the estate. I thought it odd, but he tipped well, so I didn't pry." Poirot nodded, his suspicions deepening. Moreau's inquiries suggested he was no casual visitor. He thanked Finch and made his way to the churchyard, where the groundskeeper, a wiry man named Hodges, was raking leaves. Hodges confirmed Jenny's story, adding that he'd seen a cloaked figure near the manor's woods the night of the murder, moving swiftly toward the library. "Couldn't see his face," Hodges said, leaning on his rake. "But he was tall, lean, like that Moreau fellow. Had a dark cloak, maybe wool. I didn't think much of it till I heard about Mr. Victor." Poirot's mind catalogued the details. A tall, cloaked figure, a wool cloak, jasmine-scented cigarettes, and inquiries about the Ashbournes. Moreau was emerging as a key player, possibly the midnight visitor, but his connection to the crimson veil remained unclear. Was he Clara's lover, the man in the torn photograph? Or was he an accomplice, using the veil to mislead? Determined to trace Moreau, Poirot returned to the manor, but first he detoured to the woods near the library window where Hodges had seen the figure. The ground was still soft from the storm, and Poirot's sharp eyes caught a glint among the roots of a yew tree. It was a cigarette case, silver and engraved with the initials J.M. Inside were a few gold-tipped cigarettes, their tobacco laced with a faint jasmine scent. The case was scuffed, as if dropped in haste, and a single crimson silk thread clung to its hinge. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered, his heart racing. The veil, the jasmine, the cloak all converge on this Moreau. But why leave such a clue? He tucked the case into his pocket, his thoughts racing. The cigarette case was a damning link to the cloaked figure, and its jasmine scent tied it to Clara's perfume, or someone mimicking it. Poirot suspected Moreau had dropped it while fleeing the manor, perhaps after leaving the veil in Victor's hand. But why? Was it a mistake, or a deliberate act to implicate someone else? Back at the manor, Poirot sought out Clara, finding her in the drawing-room, reading a novel with an air of studied calm. Her auburn hair glowed in the firelight, and her lavender gown was as pristine as her smile. "Madame Clara," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild, "I have been to the village and heard of the stranger Julien Moreau. A charming man, tall, with a taste for jasmine-scented cigarettes. Do you know him?" Clara's fingers tightened on her book, but her voice was steady. "Moreau? No, Monsieur Poirot. The name means nothing to me. The village is full of gossip. Surely you don't believe every tale?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, madame, this Moreau was seen near the manor the night of Victor's death, cloaked and secretive. He left behind a cigarette case marked J.M. with a scent that matches your perfume. A coincidence, perhaps?" Clara's smile faltered, her eyes darting to the fire. "You're grasping, monsieur. I don't smoke, and I don't know any Moreau. Perhaps Victor's London friends brought him here." Poirot inclined his head, unconvinced. "Perhaps, madame. But the crimson veil, seen in your possession by Mademoiselle Gray, and now this jasmine-scented clue, they point to you. If you know this Moreau, it is best to speak now." Clara rose, her movements sharp. "I've had enough of your accusations, Monsieur Poirot. I'm going to my room." Poirot watched her go, noting the tension in her shoulders. Her denials were practiced, but the cigarette case was a new pressure point. He sought out Sir Reginald next, finding him in the billiard room, his mood as dark as the oak-paneled walls. "Monsieur Reginald," Poirot said, "have you heard of a Julien Moreau, a stranger who inquired about your family in the village?" Reginald's. Q struck the ball with a crack. Moreau? Never heard of him. Victor had all sorts of shady acquaintances, probably one of his gambling cronies. "And yet," Poirot said, "this Moreau was seen near the manor at midnight, the night of Victor's death. He left a cigarette case, marked J.M., near the library. Does this spark any recognition?" Reginald's eyes narrowed. "No. But if he was sneaking about, he's your killer, not me. Why waste time with us?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Because, monsieur, the truth hides in the details. The jasmine scent, the crimson veil, they are not random. I shall find this Moreau, and he will lead me to the truth." Leaving Reginald, Poirot sought Miss Gray, hoping her quiet observance might shed light on Moreau. He found her in the nursery, mending Beatrice's dress. "Mademoiselle Gray," he said softly, "have you heard of a Julien Moreau, a stranger? In the village?" Miss Gray's needle paused, her eyes wide. "No, monsieur, but I saw a man matching that description in the village, a week ago. He was speaking to someone in a car, but I couldn't see who. He seemed secretive. Poirot nodded, his suspicions deepening. Merci, mademoiselle. Your eyes, they see much. As evening fell, Poirot stood by the library window, the cigarette case in his hand, its crimson thread a silent accusation. Moreau was the cloaked figure, he was certain, but his role-killer, lover, or pawn remained unclear. The jasmine scent linked him to Clara, but the veil's presence suggested a deeper game. Who was Julian Moreau, and what was his connection to the crimson veil? The chapter closed with Poirot gazing into the darkening woods, the cigarette case, gleaming in the firelight. The stranger in the village had left his mark, and Poirot was determined to follow it to the heart of the mystery. Chapter 7. The locked box, the pale November light filtered through the tall windows of Ashbourne Manor, casting a soft glow over the polished wood and heavy drapes. Yet it did little to dispel the chill of suspicion that hung in the air. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand hall, his gloved hands clasped behind his back, his sharp green eyes fixed on the staircase leading to Clara Ashbourne's boudoir. The crimson veil, with its intoxicating jasmine scent, remained the heart of the mystery surrounding Victor Ashbourne's murder. But the clues uncovered in the past days, the cloaked figure, the heel mark, the threatening note signed C, the torn photograph, and the cigarette case marked J. Min, had woven a complex web. The stranger in the village, Julian Moreau, had emerged as a key figure. His jasmine-scented cigarettes and inquiries about the Ashbourne family suggesting a connection to the crime. Yet Poirot's instincts pointed back to Clara, whose denials about the veil and Moreau rang hollow, and whose locked jewelry box hinted at secrets yet to be revealed. The torn photograph of Clara with an unknown man, inscribed with a lover's devotion, had deepened Poirot's suspicions of an affair. Miss Lydia Gray's confession that she had seen Clara with a crimson veil weeks earlier contradicted Clara's claims, and the jasmine perfume, identical to that on the veil, tied her to the crime scene. The cigarette case found in the woods, marked with Moreau's initials and bearing a crimson thread, suggested he was the cloaked figure who had entered the manor at midnight. But was he Clara's lover, the author of the note signed C, or a pawn in a larger scheme? Poirot knew the answers lay within the manor, and the locked box in Clara's boudoir was his next target dot. As the clock struck 10, Poirot made his way to Clara's boudoir, where he found her arranging a vase of roses, her auburn hair catching the light like burnished copper. Her lavender gown was immaculate, but her smile, when she saw Poirot, was strained, as if she anticipated his purpose. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice light but edged with irritation, "you're as persistent as the rain. Have you come to accuse me of something new?" Poirot bowed, his mustache twitching with a hint of amusement. "Madame Clara, I seek only the truth, which hides, I believe, in your jewelry box. You permitted me to examine it before, but I suspect something was removed, a letter, perhaps, or an item linked to the crimson veil. Will you open it again, or must I trouble Inspector Dawes?" Clara's fingers tightened on the rose stem, a thorn pricking her skin, though she barely flinched. "You're obsessed with that box, monsieur. It's just jewelry, nothing more. But if it will satisfy you, I'll open it." She retrieved the small key from a drawer and unlocked the rosewood chest with a deliberate click, her movements betraying a flicker of unease. Poirot stepped forward, his eyes scanning the contents: glittering necklaces, pearl earrings, a sapphire brooch. But tucked beneath a velvet lining, almost hidden, was a folded piece of paper, its edges creased as if handled often. Poirot's heart quickened as he lifted it, unfolding it to reveal a letter in a bold, masculine hand. "My dearest Clara, the secrecy torments me, but I cannot stay away. Meet me in London at our usual place on the 5th. I will bring the veil, as you asked. Let us end this charade and be together. Forever yours. Julian Poirot's eyes gleamed, the letter a revelation that confirmed his suspicions. Madame Clara, he said, holding up the paper, this is most illuminating. Julian Moreau, the stranger in the village, writes to you of love and a veil. Yet you claimed not to know him? Care to explain? Clara's face paled, her hand clutching the edge of the dressing table. Where did you find that? She demanded, her voice sharp. That's private, Monsieur Poirot. You've no right. The right, madame, is to find the murderer, Poirot interrupted, his tone firm but calm. Victor Ashbourne is dead, a crimson veil in his hand, and this letter suggests you and Moreau were involved in a liaison. Did Victor discover your affair? Is that why he died? Clara's laugh was brittle, almost a sob. An affair? You've spun quite a tale, monsieur. Yes, I knew Julian briefly. He was a mistake, a flirtation in London last summer. I ended it months ago, and I never asked for any veil. That letter, it's old, meaningless. Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. And yet, madame, the letter is dated the 5th of this month, mere days before Victor's death. And Moreau was seen near the manor that night, cloaked and secretive. You deny he came to see you? I swear it, Clara said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I haven't seen Julian in months. If he was here, it wasn't for me. Perhaps Victor knew him, owed him money. Victor was always in trouble. Poirot nodded, tucking the letter into his pocket. Perhaps, madame. But the jasmine scent on Moreau's cigarette case, the crimson thread it carried, these are not coincidences. I shall keep this letter, and we shall speak again. Clara turned away, her shoulders trembling, and Poirot left the boudoir, his mind racing. The letter was a breakthrough, linking Clara to Moreau and the veil, but her denials suggested either fear or cunning. Was she the cloaked figure using Moreau to cover her tracks, or was she a victim of a larger plot? The date on the letter, November 5th, placed Moreau in London just days before the murder, raising questions about his movements. Poirot sought out Harrow, the butler, in the pantry, where he was arranging crystal decanters with his usual precision. Monsieur Harrow, Poirot said, you mentioned Victor's London trips. Did he ever speak of a Julian Moreau, perhaps a creditor or friend? Harrow paused, his cloth stilling. Not by name, sir, but Victor did mention a Frenchman once. Someone he met at a club in London. Said the man was trouble, always asking about the family. I didn't think much of it. Master Victor was always in some scrape. And this Frenchman, Poirot pressed, did Victor say anything about a woman connected to him? Perhaps Madame Clara? Harrow's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. No, sir, nothing about Mrs. Ashbourne. But Victor was secretive, especially lately. He'd come back from London smelling of jasmine, like you mentioned before. Poirot nodded, the pieces aligning. Merci, Monsieur Harrow. You have been most helpful. His next stop was the library, where he examined the scene of the crime once more. The scratches on the windowsill, the damp leaf, the candle wax, all pointed to the cloaked figure's entry. The cigarette case found in the woods, marked J.M., confirmed Moreau's presence, and the crimson thread it bore linked it to the veil. But Clara's letter suggested she had asked for the veil, contradicting her claim of ignorance. Poirot knelt by the rug, searching for overlooked clues, and noticed a faint smudge of red near the desk, barely visible against the Persian patterns. It was lipstick, a vibrant crimson that matched the veil's hue. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, collecting the smudge with a handkerchief. A woman, perhaps in the library that night, Clara, or another. He sought out Miss Lydia Gray, hoping her observant nature might clarify the lipstick's significance. He found her in the garden, cutting herbs for the kitchen, her gray dress. blending with the overcast sky. "Mademoiselle Gray," he said, approaching softly, "you have been most helpful with your observations. Tell me, does Madame Clara wear lipstick? A bright crimson shade, perhaps?" Miss Gray's hands paused, a sprig of rosemary trembling in her grasp. "Yes, monsieur, she does. I've seen her apply it, especially when she's going out. It's a bold color, not something I'd wear." "And the night of Victor's death," Poirot continued, "did you see her with such lipstick, or perhaps notice anything unusual in her demeanor?" Miss Gray hesitated, her eyes darting to the Manor. I saw her that evening, before dinner. She was in the drawing-room, touching up her makeup. The lipstick was crimson, like you describe. But after dinner, she said she was retiring early. I didn't see her again." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Merci, mademoiselle. Your memory is a treasure." Returning to the Manor, Poirot confronted Sir Reginald in his study, where he was poring over ledgers with a scowl. "Monsieur Reginald," Poirot said, "I have found a letter suggesting Madame Clara had a liaison with Julian Moreau, the stranger seen near the Manor. Were you aware of this?" Reginald's pen snapped, ink splattering the ledger. "Clara? With that Frenchman? Ridiculous. She's flighty, but she wouldn't betray me. You're mistaken, Poirot." "And yet," Poirot said, "the letter is clear, and Moreau was here the night Victor died. If Clara was involved with him, and Victor knew, it gives a motive for murder, non?" Reginald's face darkened. "If Victor knew something, he didn't tell me. But he was always meddling, threatening to expose family secrets. If Clara's mixed up in this, I'll deal with her." Poirot inclined his head, noting Reginald's anger. "Be cautious, monsieur. The truth is a delicate thing." As evening fell, Poirot stood in the hall, the letter from Moreau in his hand, its words echoing in his mind. Clara's affair, the crimson veil, the lipstick smudge, all pointed to her. Yet the puzzle was incomplete. Was Moreau the cloaked figure, acting on Clara's behalf, or was he a scapegoat? The locked box had yielded a vital clue, but it had also raised new questions. The chapter closed with Poirot gazing at the letter, its jasmine-scented paper a silent challenge. The truth was closer, but it was tangled in lies. Julian Moreau, he knew, was the key, and Poirot would find him, no matter where he hid. Chapter 8. The alibi unravels. The November air at Ashbourne Manor had grown colder, as if the chill of Victor Ashbourne's murder had seeped into the very stones of the grand estate. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, his gloved hands clasped. Behind his back, his sharp green eyes fixed on the spot where Victor's body had lain, the crimson veil clutched in his lifeless hand. The veil, with its haunting jasmine scent, remained the enigma at the heart of the mystery, but the web of woe. Clues had grown ever more intricate. The cloaked figure seen at midnight, the heel mark, the threatening note signed C, the torn photograph of Clara with an unknown man, the cigarette case marked J.M., and the love letter from Julian Moreau all pointed to a conspiracy that entwined the Ashbourne household. Clara's affair with Moreau, confirmed by the letter found in her locked jewelry box, suggested a motive for murder, yet Poirot's instincts told him the truth was not so simple. Sir Reginald Ashbourne, with his heated argument with Victor over money, had emerged as another suspect, and Poirot was determined to test the strength of his alibi. The morning sun, weak but persistent, filtered through the library's tall windows, illuminating the Persian rug with the emerald encrusted. Dagger had ended Victor's life. Poirot's little gray cells were restless, piecing together the fragments of the puzzle. Miss Lydia Gray's confession about Clara's possession of a crimson veil and the argument between Victor and Reginald had deepened his suspicions. But the love letter from Moreau, dated mere days before the murder, had shifted his focus. Clara's denials were crumbling, Yet Reginald's anger and evasiveness suggested he, too, had secrets. The notebook entry in Victor's room, R, demands repayment. No more delays, hinted at a financial motive, and Poirot resolved to probe Reginald's alibi, which claimed he was in his study the night of the murder. Poirot made his way to the servants' quarters, seeking the maid who had been present the night of Victor's death. He found her, a young woman named Ellen, polishing silver in the pantry under Harrow's watchful eye. Her hands trembled as Poirot approached, his Homburg hat tucked under his arm, his cane tapping softly on the floor. "Mademoiselle Ellen," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "you were in the matter the night Monsieur Victor was killed, yes? Tell me, did you see Sir Reginald in his study after dinner, as he claims?" Ellen glanced at Harrow, who nodded encouragingly. I don't know, sir," she said, her voice quavering. "I passed the study around 10, fetching linens, and it was dark. I thought Sir Reginald was there, but I didn't see him. He often works late, so I didn't think much of it." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Dark, you say? Most interesting. And did you see anyone else near the library, or perhaps hear anything unusual?" Ellen hesitated, twisting her apron. "I heard voices, sir, around 11. From the library, I think. Master Victor was talking to someone, but I couldn't make out who. It sounded angry, like they were arguing." Poirot nodded, filing away her words. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful." Leaving the pantry, Poirot sought out Harrow, who was arranging decanters in the dining room. "Monsieur Harrow," he said, "Ellen tells me the study was dark at 10, yet Sir Reginald claims he was there. Can you confirm his presence?" Harrow's brow furrowed, his hands pausing on a crystal decanter. "I saw Sir Reginald in the study at 9, sir, when I brought him coffee. But after that, I was busy locking up. I didn't check again until after midnight, when I found the front door ajar." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his growing suspicion. The door ajar, the study dark most curious. "And the voices Ellen heard in the library, did you hear them as well?" "No, sir," Harrow said, "but I was in the servants' wing by then. Master Victor was alone in the library when I brought his brandy at 11:30. Poirot thanked Harrow and made his way to Sir Reginald's study, determined to confront him. The room was a fortress of oak and leather, its walls lined with books and its desk cluttered with ledgers. Reginald sat behind it, his face etched with exhaustion, a glass of whiskey in his hand despite the early hour. "Monsieur Reginald," Poirot said, closing the door behind him, "your alibi for the night of Victor's death, it is not as solid as you claim. The study was dark at 10, yet you say you were working. Where were you, truly?" Reginald's jaw tightened, his fingers gripping the glass. "I was here, Poirot. I stepped out briefly to the billiard room to clear my head. Victor's nonsense was driving me mad." "Nonsense?" Poirot pressed, his voice soft but piercing. "You argued with him the night before about a debt. I have found a notebook in his room, noting R demands repayment. You were desperate for money, non? Enough to kill?" Reginald slammed the glass down, whiskey sloshing onto the desk. "Damn it, Poirot, I didn't kill him. Yes, we argued. Victor owed me thousands, money he'd borrowed for his gambling. I told him I'd cut him off, expose his debts to Mother if he didn't pay, but I didn't stab him." Poirot's eyes narrowed, noting the tremor in Reginald's voice. "And yet, monsieur, your absence from the study leaves a gap. The cloaked figure seen that night, the crimson veil, did you see anything that might explain these?" Reginald shook his head, his eyes dark with anger. "I saw nothing. That veil's got nothing to do with me. Maybe Clara knows. She's the one with secrets, not me." Poirot inclined his head, sensing Reginald's attempt to deflect. "Perhaps, monsieur. But I shall examine your ledgers, with your permission. Money, it often speaks louder than words. Reginald hesitated then, gestured to the desk. Go ahead. You'll find nothing but proof of Victor's recklessness. Poirot began sifting through the ledgers, his meticulous eye scanning columns of figures. Most were mundane estate expenses, tenant rents, but one ledger, tucked beneath a pile of papers, caught his attention. Its cover was worn, its pages filled with cryptic entries, sums of money, initials, and dates, some marked V.A., and others R.A. One entry, dated a week before the murder, read, V.A. threatens exposure. 10,000 demanded. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, his heart racing. Victor was blackmailing you, Monsieur Reginald. This ledger, it suggests. He knew something damaging, yes? Reginald's face paled, his hands clenching into fists. Blackmail? That's absurd. Victor was in debt to me, not the other way around. Those entries are loans, investments, nothing more. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Investments, monsieur? Or payments to keep a secret? I shall keep this ledger, and we shall see what it reveals. Reginald lunged forward, his voice low and menacing. You're making a mistake, Poirot. You'll regret this. Poirot stood his ground, his cane tapping the floor with authority. The only mistake, monsieur, is to hide the truth from Hercule Poirot. I shall find it, with or without your help. Leaving the study, Poirot clutched the ledger, its entries a damning clue. Victor's blackmail, combined with Reginald's. Shaky alibi painted him as a suspect, yet the crimson veil and Clara's affair with Moreau complicated the picture. Was Reginald's anger enough to drive him to murder, or was he protecting someone else, Clara, perhaps, or another? Poirot sought out Clara, finding her in the conservatory, tending to her orchids with a distracted air. Her lavender gown was now smudged with soil, and her auburn hair was loose, framing her pale face. Madame Clara, he said, I have found evidence that Victor was blackmailing Sir Reginald. Did he know of your affair with Julian Moreau? Is that why he died? Clara's hand froze, an orchid petal falling to the floor. Blackmail, Victor? That's nonsense, Monsieur Poirot. He was reckless, but not cruel. And I told you my acquaintance with Julian was over months ago. And yet, Poirot sighed, the letter from Moreau, dated days before the murder, suggests otherwise. If Victor knew and threatened to expose you, it gives a motive, non? Clara's eyes flashed with anger. You're relentless. I had nothing to do with Victor's death. If Reginald was being blackmailed, that's his affair, not mine. Poirot nodded, unconvinced. We shall see, madame. The truth, it is like an orchid, it blooms in its own time. His final stop was Miss Lydia Gray, whom he found in the schoolroom, reading to Beatrice. Waiting until the child was distracted, he spoke softly. Mademoiselle Gray, you mentioned the argument between Victor and Sir Reginald. Did you ever hear Victor speak of blackmail, perhaps against Sir Reginald? Miss Gray's eyes widened, her hands trembling. Blackmail? No, monsieur, but Victor was always hinting at secrets, saying he knew things that could ruin people. I thought he was boasting, but now. Poirot thanked her and left, the ledger heavy in his pocket. Reginald's alibi was unraveling, and the blackmail suggested a motive, but the crimson veil and Moreau's involvement kept the puzzle incomplete. Was Reginald the cloaked figure, using the veil to frame Clara, or was another player at work? Poirot standing in the hall, the ledger in his hand, its cryptic entries a silent accusation. Reginald's secrets were laid bare, but the truth remained elusive. The crimson veil, he knew, held the key, and Poirot was determined to unlock its final secrets. Chapter 9. The Veil's Origin. The November chill had settled over Ashbourne Manor like a shroud, its frosty breath seeping through the cracks of the grand estate, mirroring the unease that gripped its inhabitants. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, his gloved hands clasped behind his back, his sharp green eyes lingering on the spot where Victor Ashbourne had met his end, a crimson veil clutched in his lifeless hand. The veil, with its intoxicating jasmine scent, remained the linchpin of the mystery, its exotic silk a silent challenge to Poirot's little gray cells. The web of clues had grown ever more tangled. The cloaked figure seen at midnight, the heel mark, the threatening note signed C, the torn photograph of Clara with an unknown man, the cigarette case marked J.M., the love letter from Julian Moreau, and the hidden ledger revealing Victor's blackmail of Sir Reginald. Each clue pointed to a conspiracy within the household, yet the veil's presence suggested an outside influence, a deliberate act to mislead or accuse. Poirot's investigation had taken a critical turn with the ledger's revelation of Victor's blackmail, which gave Reginald a motive for murder, and Clara's affair with Julian Moreau, confirmed by the love letter found in her locked jewelry box. Yet Clara's denials, Reginald's shaky alibi, and Miss Lydia Gray's confession about Clara's possession of a crimson veil kept the puzzle incomplete. The cigarette case, found in the woods with a crimson thread, linked Moreau to the cloaked figure, but the veil itself, its origin, its purpose, remained elusive. Poirot was convinced that tracing its source would illuminate the killer's intent, and he resolved to follow its trail to London, where Victor's connections and Clara's perfume had their roots. The morning was crisp as Poirot boarded a train to London, his impeccable suit and Homburg hat drawing curious glances from fellow passengers. The journey gave him time to reflect, his mind sifting through the clues. The jasmine scent, identified as a bespoke blend from Duval's in Paris, tied Clara to the veil, but the cigarette case suggested Moreau's involvement. The letter from Moreau, dated days before the murder, mentioned bringing the veil at Clara's request, yet she claimed their affair had ended months ago. Was she lying, or had someone used her perfume and veil to frame her? The ledger's entries, V.A. threatens exposure, 10,000 demanded, pointed to Reginald's desperation, but the veil's theatrical flair suggested a different hand. Arriving in London, Poirot made his way to Mayfair, where Duval's Perfumery maintained a discreet shopfront, its windows adorned with crystal vials that gleamed like jewels. The proprietress, Madame Duval, a petite woman with a sharp gaze, greeted him with a nod. "Monsieur Poirot, your reputation precedes you," she said, her French accent softened by years in London. "How may I assist?" Poirot removed his hat, his mustache twitching with anticipation. "Madame, I seek information about a jasmine perfume, a bespoke blend you crafted for Madame Clara Ashbourne. It is linked to a crimson veil found at a crime scene. Tell me, who else has purchased this scent, and have you sold such a veil?" Madame Duval's eyes narrowed, but she led him to a ledger behind the counter. "The jasmine blend is unique, crafted for Mrs. Ashbourne last year. Only 2 others have purchased it, a Mr. Victor Ashbourne, who requested it as a gift, and a gentleman who gave no name, paying in cash. As for a crimson veil, we do not sell such items, but I recall a customer inquiring about one theatrical accessory," he said, "for a performance." Poirot's heart quickened. "A performance, madame? And this gentleman, can you describe him?" "Tall, dark hair, a charming manner," she said, consulting her ledger. "He called himself Monsieur Moreau, but I sensed it was not his true name. He purchased the jasmine scent last month and asked if we could procure a crimson silk veil like those used in Eastern dances. I directed him to a boutique in Covent Garden, Madame Leclerc's, which specializes in theatrical costumes." "Merci, Madame Duval," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "You have been most helpful. This veil, it is the key to a great mystery." Leaving the perfumery, Poirot hailed a taxi to Covent Garden his mind racing. Moreau's purchase of the jasmine scent and his inquiry about a crimson veil linked him directly to the crime scene. Was he acting alone or in concert with Clara? And why a theatrical veil? The mention of a performance suggested a deliberate act, perhaps to stage the murder as a spectacle. Madame Leclerc's boutique was a treasure trove of silks and satins, its walls adorned with posters of theatrical productions. The proprietress, a vivacious woman with a penchant for dramatic gestures, welcomed Poirot with a flourish. "Monsieur, you seek costumes, yes? Something for the stage, or perhaps a masquerade?" Poirot smiled, his cane tapping the floor. "Not a costume, madame. Leclerc, but a clue. I seek a crimson silk veil, purchased recently, possibly by a gentleman named Julian Moreau. It is linked to a murder most foul." Madame Leclerc's eyes widened, her hand fluttering to her throat. "A crimson veil? Oh, monsieur, I sold such a veil last month to a man matching that description, tall, dark, with a roguish charm. He said it was for a special performance, a dance inspired by the Orient. He paid well, in cash, and asked that I keep no record, but I noted it in my ledger for my own accounts." She retrieved a leather-bound book, flipping to a page dated October 28th. Here it is: "Crimson silk veil, theatrical, for a Moreau." He was quite specific, wanted it to be lightweight, vibrant, like something a dancer would wear. Poirot's pulse quickened. "A dancer, you say? And did he mention this performance, or perhaps a woman involved?" "No, monsieur," she said, shaking her head. "But there was a poster in the shop that caught his eye for a show at the Lyceum Theatre. A dancer, Madame Celeste, performs with a crimson veil in her act. He asked about her, said he'd seen her perform, and wanted a veil like hers." Poirot's eyes gleamed, the pieces aligning. "This poster, may I see it?" Madame Leclerc led him to a wall where a vibrant poster advertised Madame Celeste, the dance of the crimson veil, depicting a woman in a flowing red veil, her pose both alluring and mysterious. The performance was scheduled for the following evening, and Poirot made a mental note to attend. "Merci, Madame Leclerc," he said. "This is a clue most vital. Tell me, did Moreau mention the Ashbourne family, or perhaps a woman named Clara?" "No." "Monsieur," she said, "he was charming but secretive. He took the veil and left, saying he had a train to catch." Poirot thanked her and left the boutique. The poster's image burned into his mind. A theatrical veil, purchased by Moreau, linked to a dancer named Madame Celeste. Was she the C of the threatening note, or was the veil a prop in a larger deception? The jasmine scent, matching Clara's perfume, suggested a connection, but the theatrical element hinted at a staged act, perhaps to frame someone within. The matter, returning to Ashbourne Manor by evening, Poirot sought out Clara, determined to confront her with this new evidence. He found her in the drawing-room, sipping tea with an air of studied calm, her auburn hair glowing in the firelight. "Madame Clara," he said, his tone deceptively mild, "I have traced the crimson veil to a London boutique, purchased by Julian Moreau for a theatrical performance. He mentioned you in a letter, asking to bring the veil. Yet you claim your affair was over. Can you explain?" Clara's teacup clattered against its saucer, her eyes flashing with anger. "You're relentless, Monsieur Poirot. I told you Julian was a mistake, long over. If he bought a veil, it wasn't for me. Perhaps he was obsessed, trying to win me back. I don't know." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "And yet, madame, the veil was found in Victor's hand, scented with your jasmine perfume. And Miss Grey saw you with such a veil weeks ago. If Moreau brought it to you, and Victor discovered your affair, it gives a motive non?" Clara rose, her hands trembling. "I had nothing to do with Victor's death. If Julian was here, He acted alone. I swear it. Poirot inclined his head, unconvinced. We shall see, madame. I shall attend Madame Celeste's performance tomorrow, and perhaps the veil's true purpose will be revealed. Leaving Clara, Poirot sought out Sir Reginald, finding him in his study, his face haggard from the strain of the investigation. Monsieur Reginald, Poirot said, I have traced the crimson veil to a London boutique, purchased by Julian Moreau. Did Victor ever mention this man, perhaps in connection with his debts? Reginald's eyes narrowed, his fingers gripping. Pen. Moreau? No, but Victor was always in trouble with shady types. If this Frenchman was involved, he's your killer, not me. Poirot nodded, sensing Reginald's deflection. Perhaps, monsieur, but the ledger I found suggests Victor was blackmailing you. If he knew of your financial troubles, or perhaps of Clara's affair, it gives you a motive, non? Reginald's face darkened. I told you, those were loans, not blackmail. You're barking up the wrong tree, Poirot. Poirot left the study, his mind churning. The veil's theatrical origin suggested a deliberate act, perhaps to stage the murder as a spectacle. Was Moreau the cloaked figure, acting on Clara's behalf, or was he a scapegoat? The ledger pointed to Reginald's desperation, but the veil's connection to Clara and Moreau kept the puzzle incomplete. The chapter closed with Poirot standing in the hall, the image of Madame Celeste's poster vivid in his mind. The crimson veil's origin was clear, but its purpose remained a mystery. Tomorrow's performance, he knew, would bring him closer to the truth, and Hercule Poirot was ready to face it. Chapter 10. The Dancer's Tale. The London evening was draped in a soft mist, the gaslights of Covent Garden casting a golden haze over the cobblestone streets. Hercule Poirot, impeccable in his tailored suit and Homburg hat, stepped from a taxi. Outside the Lyceum Theatre, his cane tapping rhythmically as he approached the marquee. The poster for Madame Celeste, the Dance of the Crimson Veil, loomed large, its vibrant depiction of a veiled dancer stirring Poirot's anticipation. The crimson veil, with its haunting jasmine scent, was the heart of the mystery surrounding Victor Ashbourne's murder at Ashbourne Manor, and its theatrical origin, traced to a London boutique and linked to Julian Moreau, had led Poirot here. His little gray cells were alight with possibilities, eager to unravel the dancer's connection to the crime. The past days had woven a complex tapestry of clues. The cloaked figure seen at midnight, the heel mark by the library window, the threatening note signed C, the torn photograph of Clara with an unknown man, the cigarette case marked J.M., the love letter from Moreau, the hidden ledger revealing Victor's blackmail of Sir Reginald, and the veil's purchase by Moreau for a special performance. Clara's affair with Moreau, confirmed by the letter in her locked jewelry box, suggested a motive, yet her denials and Reginald's shaky alibi kept the puzzle incomplete. Miss Lydia Gray's confession about Clara's possession of a crimson veil and the argument between Victor and Reginald added layers of suspicion, but the veil's theatrical flair pointed to an outside influence. Madame Celeste, whose performance featured a crimson veil, was the next piece in the puzzle, and Poirot was determined to learn her role. Inside the theater, the air was thick with perfume and anticipation, the audience a glittering array of Londons. Elite. Poirot took his seat in a private box, his sharp green eyes scanning the crowd for familiar faces, perhaps Clara, or even Moreau, though the latter had vanished from the village. The lights dimmed, and Madame Celeste appeared, a vision of grace in a flowing crimson veil that shimmered under the stage lights. Her dance was mesmerizing, a blend of Eastern mystique and Western elegance, the veil weaving around her like a living flame. Poirot noted its similarity to the one found in Victor's hand-lightweight silk, vibrant red, scented with jasmine. Was this mere coincidence, or a deliberate echo? The performance ended to thunderous applause, and Poirot made his way backstage, his credentials securing him access to Madame Celeste's dressing room. The dancer, still in her stage makeup, was removing her veil when he entered, her dark eyes meeting his with a mix of curiosity and wariness. She was a woman of perhaps 30, with raven hair and a presence that commanded attention, even in repose. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice accented with a hint of French, "I am told you are a detective of great renown. To what do? I owe this visit?" Poirot bowed, removing his hat with a flourish. "Madame Celeste, your performance was magnifique, but I am here on a matter most grave. A crimson veil, like the one you wear, was found at a murder scene in Kent, in the hand of a man named Victor Ashburn. I have traced its purchase to a boutique in Covent Garden by a man named Julian Moreau. Do you know this man? Or this veil?" Madame Celeste's hand paused, the veil slipping slightly in her grasp. "A murder? Mon Dieu, that is terrible." "Yes, I know of Monsieur Moreau. He came to my performance last month, here at the Lyceum. He was charming, but intense. He asked about my veil, said he admired its design and wished to purchase one like it. I told him it was custom-made by Madame Leclerc, and he left." Poirot's eyes gleamed, sensing a breakthrough. "And this Moreau, did he mention the Ashbourne family, or perhaps a woman named Clara?" Madame Celeste hesitated, her fingers tracing the veil's edge. "He spoke of a woman, but not by name. He said she was beautiful, with auburn hair, and that he wished to give her a gift to right a wrong. I thought it romantic, but his eyes, they were troubled, almost obsessed." Poirot's heart quickened, the description matching Clara. "Right or wrong, you say? Most interesting. And the veil, madame, have you sold or given one to anyone?" "Yes," she admitted, her voice softening. "Moreau returned a week later, after I directed him to Madame Leclerc. He showed me a crimson veil he purchased, identical to mine, and asked if I'd sent it with my perfume, as a personal touch. I use a jasmine blend from Duval's in Paris. I obliged, thinking it a harmless request. He paid generously and left." Poirot's pulse raced, the pieces aligning. This veil, scented with jasmine, was found in the victim's hand. Did Moreau say why he needed it, or where he was going? "No," Madame Celeste said, shaking her head. "But he seemed agitated, as if time was pressing. He mentioned a train to Kent, and something about settling a debt. I didn't pry men like him often have secrets." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing her words. Moreau's obsession with Clara, his purchase of the veil, and his trip to Kent all pointed to his role as the cloaked figure. But why leave the veil with Victor? Was it a message, a taunt, or a mistake? "Madame," he said, "one final question. Have you received any unusual messages or visitors since Moreau's visit?" Madame Celeste's eyes darkened, and she reached into a drawer, producing a folded note. "This arrived yesterday, slipped under my door. I thought it a prank, but now, perhaps it is connected." Poirot unfolded the note, its typed words stark against the paper. "Leave London, or the veil will be your shroud. Tell no one, or you'll regret it." The note was unsigned, but its threat was clear. Poirot's eyes narrowed, the handwriting replaced by cold, mechanical type, a new twist in the mystery. "Madame, this is most serious. May I keep this note? And will you permit me to search your dressing room for further clues?" She nodded, her composure faltering. "Please, Messieurs. I want no part of this." Poirot examined the room, his meticulous eye scanning every surface. The dressing table held cosmetics and jewelry, but a small velvet box caught his attention, its lid adorned with a jasmine flower. Inside was a single gold-tipped cigarette, its scent matching the case marked J, found in the woods. "Mon Dewey, Poirot murmured, tucking it into an evidence envelope. Moreau's shadow lingers here. He searched further, finding a program for the Lyceum season, with Moreau's name scribbled in the margin, beside Madame Celeste's performance date. The note, the cigarette, the program all confirmed Moreau's connection to the dancer. But the threatening note suggested someone else was watching, perhaps to silence her. Was it Clara, protecting her affair, or Reginald, covering his tracks? Or was there another player, manipulating the veil's trail? Thanking Madame Celeste, Poirot left the theater, the threatening note in his pocket, his mind racing. The dancer's tale had illuminated Moreau's role, but the typed threat introduced a new layer of intrigue. He hailed a taxi back to his London flat, intending to return to Ashbourne Manor the next day, but first he stopped at a telegraph office to send a message to Inspector Dawes, requesting a search for Moreau's whereabouts in London. Back at his flat, Poirot sat by the fire, the note and cigarette before him. The jasmine scent, the crimson veil, the theatrical performance all pointed to a staged act, but the threat suggested fear, perhaps from someone within the manor. He recalled Clara's denials, her trembling hands when confronted with Moreau's letter, and Reginald's anger over the blackmail ledger. Miss Grey's quiet observance, too, hinted at unseen truths. The note's typed anonymity was a stark contrast to the handwritten C, suggesting a different hand, perhaps the killer's. The next morning, Poirot returned to Ashbourne Manor, the mist still clinging to the Kent countryside. He sought out Clara, finding her in the conservatory, her auburn hair loose, her lavender gown stained with soil. "Madame Clara," he said, producing the threatening note, "I have met Madame Celeste, who confirms Julian Moreau purchased a crimson veil scented with your jasmine perfume. This note, found in her dressing room, threatens her silence. Do you know of anyone who might wish to silence her?" Clara's eyes widened, her hand clutching an orchid stem. "A threat? No, Monsieur Poirot. I know nothing of this. If Julian was involved with this dancer, it's his doing, not mine. I told you our affair is over." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "And yet, madame, the veil was in Victor's hand, and Moreau mentioned you in his letter. If he sought to right a wrong, as Madame Celeste claims, what wrong was it? Your affair, perhaps, or something Victor knew." Clara turned away, her voice sharp. "You're grasping, monsieur. I had nothing to do with Victor's death or this dancer. Leave me alone." Poirot inclined his head, unconvinced. He sought out Sir Reginald next, finding him in his study, his face haggard. "Monsieur Reginald," he said, "I have learned that Julian Moreau purchased the crimson veil for a theatrical performance, linked to Madame Celeste. He was seen near the manor the night of Victor's death, and now a threatening note has been sent to the dancer. Did Victor know of this man, or perhaps of a secret worth killing for?" Reginald's jaw tightened, his pen snapping in his hand. "Moreau again? I told you, I don't know him. If Victor was mixed up with theater types, that's his folly. And I don't send threats, Poirot." Poirot nodded, sensing Reginald's defensiveness. "Perhaps, monsieur. But the ledger suggests Victor's blackmail. If he knew of your troubles, or Clara's affair, it gives a motive, non?" Reginald rose, his voice low. "Get out, Poirot. I've had enough of your accusations." Leaving the study, Poirot sought Miss Grey, finding her in the garden, cutting roses. "Mademoiselle Grey," he said softly, "have you heard of Madame Celeste, a dancer in London, or seen anything typed, perhaps a note?" Miss Grey's hands trembled, a rose falling to the ground. "No, monsieur, but I saw a typewriter in Sir Reginald's study, an old one. I don't know if it's used, but it's there." Poirot thanked her, his mind churning. The typed note, the typewriter in Reginald's study, the veil's theatrical origin all suggested a conspiracy, but the players remained unclear. Was Moreau the killer, acting for Clara, or was Reginald hiding a darker truth? The chapter closed. With Poirot standing in the hall, the threatening note in his hand, its typed words a silent challenge. Madame Celeste's tale had brought him closer to the truth, but the veil's purpose remained a mystery. The next clue, he knew, lay within the manor, and Hercule Poirot was ready to seize it. Chapter 11. The hidden passage. The November dusk settled over Ashbourne Manor like a velvet curtain, its shadows deepening the chill that permeated the grand estate. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, his gloved hands clasped behind his back, his sharp green eyes tracing the contours of the room where Victor Ashbourne had met his end. A crimson veil clutched in his lifeless hand. The veil, with its intoxicating jasmine scent, remained the enigma at the heart of the mystery, its theatrical origin linked to Madame Celeste and purchased by Julian Moreau, adding a layer of intrigue. Poirot's little gray cells were restless, weaving together the intricate threads of the case. The cloaked figure seen at midnight, the heel mark by the library window, the threatening note signed C, the torn photograph of Clara. With an unknown man, the cigarette case marked James, the love letter from Moreau, the hidden ledger revealing Victor's blackmail of Sir Reginald, and the typed threat to Madame Celeste. Each clue pointed to a conspiracy within and beyond the manor, but the truth remained elusive, hidden in the shadows of secrets. Poirot's visit to the Lyceum Theatre had confirmed Moreau's role in purchasing the crimson veil, scented with Clara's jasmine perfume, for a special performance. The threatening note found in Madame Celeste's dressing room suggested someone feared her knowledge, and Miss Grey's mention of a typewriter in Reginald's study hinted at a possible source. Clara's affair with Moreau, evidenced by the love letter, gave her a motive, yet her denials and Reginald's shaky alibi kept the puzzle incomplete. The ledger's revelation of Victor's blackmail pointed to Reginald's desperation, but the veil's theatrical flair suggested a staged act, perhaps to frame Clara or mislead Poirot. Determined to uncover physical evidence within the manor, Poirot resolved to re-examine the library, suspecting it held secrets beyond the obvious. The library was silent, its oak-paneled walls absorbing the faint glow of the gas lamps. Poirot knelt by the window, where the scratches on the sill and a damp yew leaf had confirmed the cloaked figure's entry. The heel mark outside, now faded by rain, and the crimson lipstick smudge on the rug suggested a woman's presence, yet Moreau's cigarette case complicated the narrative. Poirot's meticulous eye scanned the room, lingering on the heavy bookcases that lined the walls. Their ornate carvings, depicting ivy and roses, seemed almost too perfect, as if designed to conceal rather than adorn. He approached a bookcase near the window, his fingers tracing the carvings. A faint draught brushed his hand, cool and unexpected, emanating from a seam where the bookcase met the wall. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his heart quickening. "A draught in a sealed room? This is no coincidence." With careful pressure, he pushed against the bookcase, feeling a slight give. A soft click echoed, and a section of the panel swung inward, revealing a narrow passage, its stone walls damp and mossy. The air was stale, tinged with the scent of earth and decay, and a faint glimmer of light flickered at its far end. Poirot's pulse raced. This was the hidden passage, a secret route from the library to the gardens, explaining how the cloaked figure had entered undetected. Stepping inside, Poirot held his pocket torch aloft, its beam cutting through the darkness. The passage was cramped, its ceiling low, forcing him to stoop as he navigated the uneven floor. Cobwebs brushed his face, but he pressed on, his cane tapping softly. The passage sloped downward, leading to a wooden door that opened onto this manor's gardens, near the yew tree where he had found Moreau's cigarette case. The door's hinges were oiled, suggesting recent use. and a faint scuff mark on the threshold matched the heel mark outside the library window. Most ingenious, Poirot whispered, his mind racing. The cloaked figure entered here, leaving. No trace in the store. But why the veil? He retraced his steps, examining the passage's walls. Near the library end, tucked into a crevice, he found a blood-stained glove, its leather worn but unmistakably fine, sized for a man's hand. Blood was dry, dark against the pale leather, and a single crimson thread clung to its cuff, echoing the veil. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he carefully placed the glove in an evidence envelope. A glove stained with Victor's blood, he mused. The killer's, or another misdirection? Returning to the library, Poirot closed the passage, ensuring. The bookcase clicked back into place. The glove was a breakthrough, suggesting the killer's carelessness or a deliberate plant. Its size pointed to a man Moreau, perhaps, or Reginald, but the crimson thread tied it to the veil, and thus to Clara. Poirot resolved to test the glove for fingerprints. But first, he needed to confront the household with this new evidence. He sought out Clara, finding her in the drawing room, arranging flowers with a distracted air. Her auburn hair was pinned loosely, her lavender gown smudged with pollen. "Madame Clara," he said, his tone deceptively mild, "I have found a hidden passage in the library, used by the cloaked figure to enter the manor. Within it, a blood-stained glove, bearing a crimson thread like the veil. Can you explain this?" Clara's hand froze, a rose dropping to the floor. "A passage? A glove? I know nothing of this, Monsieur Poirot. You're weaving fantasies now." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "And yet, madame, the veil was in your possession, as mademoiselle. Gray attested, and Moreau purchased it for you. If he used this passage, perhaps at your bidding, it explains much, non?" Clara's eyes flashed with anger. "I told you, my affair with Julian was over. If he was sneaking about, it was his own doing. I had no part in Victor's death." Poirot nodded, unconvinced. "We shall see, madame. The glove, it will tell its own story." Next, he sought Sir Reginald, finding him in his study, poring over ledgers with a scowl. The typewriter Miss Gray had mentioned sat on a side table, its keys dusty but functional. "Monsieur Reginald," Poirot said, "I have discovered a hidden passage from the library to the gardens, used by the cloaked figure. A blood-stained glove was found within, suggesting the killer's identity. Your alibi, it is weak, and Victor's blackmail gives you a motive. Did you know of this passage?" Reginald's face paled, his pen trembling. "A passage? No, I didn't know. As for the glove, it's not mine. Victor was always poking into old secrets. Maybe he found it and got himself killed." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the typewriter, monsieur?" A threatening note was sent to Madame Celeste, typed, not written. "Have you used this machine recently?" Reginald's jaw tightened. "That old thing? It's been here for years, barely touched." "You're grasping, Poirot." Poirot inclined his head, noting the defensiveness. "Perhaps, monsieur. But the gloves. Fingerprints, they will not lie." He sought out Miss Gray, finding her in the schoolroom, teaching Beatrice geography. Waiting until the child was distracted, he spoke softly. "Mademoiselle Gray, I have found a hidden passage in the library, with a blood-stained glove inside. Have you ever seen such a glove? Perhaps in Sir Reginald's or Madame Clara's possession?" Miss Gray's hands trembled, her atlas slipping. "A glove? No, monsieur, but I saw Sir Reginald with a pair of leather gloves last week in the study. They were fine, like a gentleman's. I thought nothing of it." Poirot thanked her, his mind churning. The glove's size suggested a man, but the crimson thread linked it to the veil, and thus to Clara. He sent the glove to Inspector Gauze for fingerprint analysis, requesting urgency. The passage explained the cloaked figure's entry, but the glove's blood and thread suggested a calculated act, perhaps to frame Moreau, or to protect someone within the manor dot as evening fell. Poirot stood in the library, the hidden passages. Door concealed once more. The glove was a pivotal clue, but its owner remained unclear. Was it Moreau's, propped in haste, or Reginald's, planted to mislead? Clara's affair and Reginald's blackmail motive kept them both in the frame, but the typed threat to Madame Celeste hinted at a third party, manipulating the shadows. The chapter closed with Poirot clutching the evidence envelope, the blood-stained. Glove's crimson thread, a silent accusation. The hidden passage had revealed a path to the truth, but the killer's identity was still veiled. Hercule Poirot was determined to unmask them, no matter how deep the shadows. Chapter 12. The fingerprint's tale. The November morning at Ashbourne Manor was crisp, the frost on the lawn sparkling like diamonds under a weak sun. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand hall, his gloved hands adjusting his silk tie, his sharp, green eyes reflecting the weight of the mystery that had consumed him for over a week. The crimson veil, its jasmine scent as elusive as the truth, remained the heart of Victor Ashbourne's murder, its presence in his lifeless hand a deliberate act that taunted Poirot's little gray cells. The web of clues was intricate. The cloaked figure at midnight, the heel mark, the threatening note signed C, the torn photograph of Clara with an unknown man, the cigarette case marked James, the love letter from Julian Moreau, the hidden ledger revealing Victor's blackmail of Sir Reginald, the veil's theatrical origin linked to Madame Celeste, the typed threat to the dancer, and the blood-stained glove found in the hidden passage. Each thread pointed to a conspiracy weaving through the manor, but the glove's fingerprints, now with Inspector Dawes for analysis, promised to unravel the killer's identity. Poirot's discovery of the hidden passage from the library to the gardens had explained the cloaked figure's entry, and the blood-stained glove, bearing a crimson thread, suggested a man's involvement, possibly Moreau or Reginald. Clara's affair with Moreau, confirmed by the love letter, gave her a motive, yet her denials and Reginald's shaky alibi kept both in the frame. Miss Grey's observation of Reginald's leather gloves and the typewriter in his study hinted at his role in the typed threat to Madame Celeste, but the veil's connection to Clara's jasmine perfume complicated the narrative. Poirot was certain the fingerprints would provide clarity, and he awaited Dawes' report with anticipation as the clock struck 10. Inspector Dawes arrived, his ruddy face flushed from the cold. He carried a manila envelope, his expression a mix of respect and exasperation. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, handing over the envelope, "your glove's been analyzed. We found 2 sets of fingerprints. One matches Victor Ashbourne, likely from when he was stabbed, but the other, they belong to Sir Reginald Ashbourne." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching with satisfaction. "Mon Dieu, Inspector, this is a revelation most vital. Sir Reginald's fingerprints on a glove stained with Victor's blood? His alibi, it crumbles like a house of cards. We must confront him, tout de suite." Dawes nodded, though his tone was cautious. "It's damning, but it's not proof he's the killer. Could be he handled the glove after the fact, or it was planted. We've also traced Julian Moreau. He's been spotted in London, at a boarding house in Whitechapel. I've men watching him." Poirot inclined his head, filing away the information. "Excellent work, Inspector. Moreau remains a shadow, but the glove points to Reginald. Let us proceed with care. The truth, it is delicate. They found Sir Reginald in his study, his face haggard as he pored over ledgers, a glass of whiskey. At his elbow, despite the early hour, the typewriter sat on a side table, its keys still dusty, but now a silent accusation. Reginald looked up, his eyes narrowing at the sight of Dawes and Poirot. "Monsieur Reginald," Poirot began, his voice calm but unyielding, I have received the fingerprint analysis of the blood-stained glove found in the hidden passage. Your prints, they are upon it, alongside Victor's blood. Your alibi, that you were in this study, is false. Explain, s'il vous plaît, how your glove came to be in such a place. Reginald's hand trembled, the whiskey glass clattering against the desk. My glove? That's impossible. I haven't worn gloves in weeks, and I certainly wasn't in any passage. Someone setting me up, Poirot. Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. And yet, monsieur, the ledger reveals Victor was blackmailing you, demanding £10,000 to keep a secret. The argument Mademoiselle Gray overheard, your absence from the study at 10, and now this glove all point to you. Did Victor know something so damning that you silenced him with a dagger? Reginald's face darkened, his voice rising. I didn't kill him. Yes, Victor was blackmailing me over debts, bad investments I'd hidden from Mother. He threatened to tell her, ruin my standing, but I didn't stab him. That glove, it's not mine, or someone took it from my wardrobe. Poirot's eyes narrowed, noting Reginald's desperation. And the typewriter, monsieur? A threatening note was sent to Madame Celeste, typed, not written. This machine, it is yours, yes? Reginald glanced at the typewriter, his jaw tightening. It's an old relic, barely used. Anyone could have touched it, Clara. The staff, even Victor. You're barking up the wrong tree, Poirot. Dawes interjected, his tone gruff. We'll need to take the typewriter for analysis, Sir Reginald. And you'll come with us for questioning. Reginald stood, his fists clenched. This is outrageous. I'm no murderer. Find Moreau, he's your man, not me. Poirot inclined. His head, his mind racing. The fingerprints were damning, but Reginald's insistence on a setup was plausible. The glove's crimson thread linked it to the veil, and thus to Clara and Moreau. Was Reginald the killer, or a scapegoat? Poirot needed to test Clara's reaction to this new evidence. He found her in the conservatory, tending to her orchids with a distracted air, her auburn hair loose, her lavender gown smudged with soil. Madame Clara, Poirot said, producing the glove from its envelope. A blood-stained glove was found in a hidden passage, bearing Sir Reginald's fingerprints. Yet it carries a crimson thread, like the veil you once held. Can you explain this? Clara's hand froze, an orchid petal falling to the floor. Reginald's glove? I don't know, Monsieur Poirot. I told you, I had nothing to do with the veil or Victor's death. If Reginald's involved, it's his own doing. Poirot's gaze was piercing. And yet, madame, the love letter from Julien Marot mentions the veil, and Madame Celeste confirmed he scented it with your jasmine perfume. If Reginald knew of your affair, and Victor was blackmailing him, perhaps you both conspired non? Clara's eyes flashed with anger, her voice sharp. Conspired? That's absurd. I ended things with Julien months ago. If Reginald killed Victor, it was over money, not me. I'm innocent, Poirot. Poirot nodded, unconvinced. The truth, madame, it will emerge. The glove, the veil, the passage, they tell the story, and I shall read it to its end. Leaving Clara, Poirot sought out Miss Lydia Gray, hoping her quiet. Observance might clarify the glove's significance. He found her in the schoolroom, correcting Beatrice's drawings, her gray dress blending with the shadows. Mademoiselle Gray, he said softly, a blood-stained glove was found in a hidden passage, with Sir Reginald's fingerprints. You mentioned seeing him with leather gloves. Have you seen such a glove elsewhere? Perhaps with Madame Clara? Miss. Gray's hands trembled, a pencil slipping from her grasp. No, monsieur, but I saw a glove like that in the laundry last week, stained with something dark. I thought it was ink, but now, perhaps it was blood. It was in a basket with Sir Reginald's clothes. Poirot's heart quickened. Most significant, mademoiselle. And the passage? Did you know of it? No. she said, shaking her head. But I've heard the staff whisper about old tunnels in the manor, used during the Civil War. I thought they were just stories. Poirot thanked her and returned to the library, his mind churning. The glove's fingerprints pointed to Reginald, but its presence in the laundry suggested someone had access to his belongings, Clara, perhaps, or a servant. The hidden passage explained the cloaked figure's entry, but the crimson thread tied it to the veil, and thus to Clara and Moreau. The typed threat to Madame Celeste, possibly from Reginald's typewriter, hinted at a cover-up, but the glove's blood suggested a direct act of violence. Poirot met with Dawes in the hall, sharing his findings. Inspector, the glove is a pivotal clue, but we must test the typewriter for fingerprints and compare its font to the threatening note. And Moreau his whereabouts in London. They are critical. Dawes nodded, scribbling in his notebook. We'll have the typewriter analyzed by tomorrow. As for Moreau, my men are closing in. He's been seen at a gambling den in Whitechapel, but he's slippery. Bon, Poirot said. We are close, Inspector. The fingerprints, they tell a tale, but the veil's purpose remains the key. As evening fell, Poirot stood in the library, the hidden passage's door concealed behind the bookcase. The glove's fingerprints had unraveled Reginald's alibi, but the crimson thread and jasmine scent kept Clara and Moreau in the frame. Was Reginald the killer, driven by blackmail, or had someone planted the glove to mislead? The typed note suggested a third hand, and Poirot was determined to find it. The blood-stained glove's crimson thread a silent challenge. The fingerprint's tale had brought him closer to the truth, but the killer's identity remained veiled. Hercule Poirot was ready to lift it, no matter the cost. Chapter 13. The Typewriter's Secret. November frost had tightened its grip on Ashbourne Manor, turning the manicured lawns into a glittering expanse that belied the darkness within its walls. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand hall, his polished shoes gleaming against the marble floor, his sharp green eyes fixed on the staircase leading to Sir Reginald's study. The crimson veil, with its haunting jasmine scent, remained the heart of the mystery surrounding Victor Ashbourne's murder. Its theatrical flourish a challenge to Poirot's little gray cells. The case had grown ever more intricate, with clues piling like leaves in the autumn wind. The cloaked figure at midnight, the heel mark, the threatening note signed C, the torn photograph of Clara with an unknown man, the cigarette case marked J.M., the love letter from Julian Moreau, the hidden ledger revealing Victor's blackmail, the veil's origin linked to Madame Celeste, the typed threat to the dancer, and the blood-stained glove bearing Reginald's fingerprints. Each thread pointed to a conspiracy weaving through the manor, but the typewriter in Reginald's study, suspected as the source of the threatening note to Madame Celeste, held the promise of a new revelation. Poirot's discovery of the hidden passage had explained the cloaked figure's entry, and the glove's fingerprints had unraveled Reginald's alibi. Yet the crimson thread on the glove kept Clara and Julian Moreau in the frame. Clara's affair, confirmed by Moreau's love letter, gave her a motive, but her denials and Reginald's desperation over Victor's blackmail suggested multiple players. Miss Grey's observation of a typewriter in the study, combined with the typed threat to Madame Celeste, hinted at Reginald's involvement, but Poirot suspected a deeper deception. The glove's presence in the laundry, as noted by Miss Grey, suggested someone had access to Reginald's belongings and the typewriters. Font could confirm or refute his role in the threat. Poirot awaited Inspector Dawes' analysis with anticipation, determined to uncover the typewriter's secret dot as the clock struck 11. Dawes arrived, his heavy coat dusted with frost, a folder tucked under his arm. His ruddy face was grim, but his eyes held a spark of excitement. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, handing over the folder, "we've analyzed the typewriter from Sir Reginald's study. The font matches the threatening note sent to Madame Celeste same misaligned E, and warranty. But there's more. We found a partial fingerprint on the note. Not Reginald's, but it's too smudged to identify. And we've had a breakthrough. On Moreau, he's been arrested in Whitechapel, caught trying to pawn a gold watch that matches one missing from Victor's room. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching with satisfaction. Magnifique, Inspector. The typewriters. Font, it is a link most vital, and Moreau's arrest brings him into our grasp. The fingerprint, though smudged, suggests another hand. We must examine the typewriter further, and I wish to question Moreau. But first, let us confront Sir Reginald with this evidence. Dawes nodded, his expression cautious. Reginald's. Not going to like this, but the glove and now the typewriter make him look guilty. Let's tread carefully. He's a powerful man. They found Reginald in his study, his face etched with strain, a decanter of whiskey half empty on his desk. The typewriter sat on a side table, its dusty keys now a silent accusation. Reginald looked up, his eyes narrowing at the sight of Poirot and Dawes. The folder in the inspector's hand, a clear threat. Monsieur Reginald, Poirot began, his voice calm but unyielding. The typewriter in this room has been analyzed, and its font matches a threatening note sent to Madame Celeste, warning her to leave London. Your fingerprints were found on a blood-stained glove in the hidden passage, and Victor's ledger reveals his blackmail. Your alibi is false, and the evidence mounts. Will you explain, or shall we assume your guilt? Reginald's face paled, his hand slamming the desk, whiskey splashing. This is a witch hunt, Poirot? Yes, I used the typewriter for estate business, but I didn't send any threats. And that glove, it's not mine. Someone's framing me, planting evidence to make me look like the killer. Poirot's gaze was piercing. And who, monsieur, would go to such lengths? Victor was blackmailing you, demanding £10,000. To keep a secret. What did he know that drove you to such desperation? Reginald's voice dropped, his eyes darting to the door. Victor knew about financial irregularities. I'd borrowed from the estate's funds to cover bad investments. He threatened to tell Mother, ruin me. But I swear, I didn't kill him. I was in the billiard room, not the library, when it happened. Dawes interjected, his tone gruff. Then how'd your fingerprints get on the glove, Sir Reginald? And why's your typewriter linked to the threat? Reginald's shoulders slumped, his voice hoarse. I don't know. Someone must have taken the glove from my wardrobe, and the typewriter Clara uses it sometimes for her letters. Ask her. Poirot's mind raced, the mention of Clara reigniting his suspicions. The glove's crimson thread and the veil's jasmine scent tied her to the crime, and her access to the typewriter suggested a deeper role. He decided to inspect the typewriter himself, approaching the side table with meticulous care. The keys were indeed worn, the E slightly misaligned, but a faint smudge of ink on the ribbon caught his eye. He lifted the cover, revealing a crumpled sheet of paper caught in the mechanism, its text partially legible. Agreement to transfer £10,000 to VA on condition of silence. Poirot's heart quickened, his fingers carefully extracting. The paper. It was a draft of a forged document, purporting to be a contract between Reginald and Victor, dated the day before the murder. The signature was Reginald's, but the handwriting was uneven, as if copied by another hand. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured. A forgery, designed to incriminate Reginald. But by whom? He turned to Reginald, holding up the paper. This document, monsieur, suggests you agreed to pay Victor to keep silent. Yet it is a forgery, not in your hand. Who else has access to this typewriter? And why would they create such a deception? Reginald's eyes widened, his voice trembling with rage. A forgery? That's Clara's doing, I'll wager. She's been scheming with that Frenchman Moreau to ruin me. She's the one you should be questioning, not me. Poirot inclined. his head unconvinced. "We shall see, monsieur. The truth, it is like a fingerprint unique and indelible." Leaving Reginald under Dawes' watch, Poirot sought out Clara, finding her in the drawing room, arranging a vase of lily with an air of forced calm. Her auburn hair was pinned tightly, her lavender gown pristine, but her eyes betrayed unease as Poirot approached, the forged document in his hand. "Madame Clara," he said, his tone deceptively mild, "I have found a forged document, typed on Sir Reginald's typewriter, implicating him in a payment to Victor for silence." "You have used this typewriter?" "Yes." "And the crimson veil, scented with your jasmine perfume, was seen in your possession. Did you forge this document to frame your husband, perhaps to protect your lover, Julian Moreau?" Clara's hand froze, a lily petal drifting to the floor. "A forged document? I know nothing of it, Monsieur Poirot." "Yes, I've used the typewriter. For letters, but I didn't write any threats or forgeries." "You're accusing me of madness." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "And yet, madame, the love letter from Moreau speaks of the veil, and Madame Celeste confirmed he scented it with your perfume. The glove's crimson thread links to you, and now this document. If Victor knew of your affair, or of Reginald's financial troubles, it gives a motive, non?" Clara's voice rose, her composure cracking. "I told you my affair with Julian was over. If someone's framing Reginald, it's not me. Perhaps Victor forged it himself to extort more money." Poirot nodded, filing away her words. "Perhaps, madame. But the typewriter's secret, it will not remain hidden." He sought out Miss Lydia Gray, hoping her quiet observance might clarify the forgery's origin. He found her in the garden, tending roses, her gray dress dusted with frost. "Mademoiselle Gray," he said softly, "a forged document was found in Sir Reginald's typewriter, implicating him in Victor's blackmail. You mentioned seeing the typewriter. Have you seen anyone use it recently? Perhaps Madame Clara or another?" Miss Gray's hands trembled, a rose thorn pricking her finger. I saw Madame Clara at the typewriter last week, typing something late at night. I thought it was a letter, but she seemed nervous, hiding the paper when I entered." Poirot's heart quickened. "Most significant, mademoiselle. And the glove in the laundry, stained with what you thought was ink? Could it have been blood?" Miss Gray's eyes widened, her voice a whisper. "I don't know, monsieur. But it was with Sir Reginald's clothes, not Madame Clara's." Poirot thanked her and returned to the hall, the forged document in his pocket, its implications swirling in his mind. The typewriter's font linked it to the threat, and Clara's use of it suggested her involvement, yet the glove's fingerprints pointed to Reginald. Moreau's arrest in London offered a chance to question him, but the forgery hinted at a third party manipulating evidence to mislead. Was Clara framing Reginald, or was someone else orchestrating the deception? As evening fell, Poirot gathered the household in the drawing room, Clara, Reginald, Miss Gray, and Harrow, determined to force a reaction. He held up the forged document, his voice commanding attention. "Mesdames et messieurs, this document found in Sir Reginald's typewriter is a forgery designed to incriminate him in Victor's blackmail. The typewriter matches a threat sent to Madame Celeste, and a blood-stained glove bears Sir Reginald's fingerprints. Yet the crimson veil points to Madame Clara and Julian Moreau. Someone in this room knows the truth. Speak now, or Hercule Poirot will unmask you." Clara gasped, her hand clutching Reginald's arm, while Reginald's face reddened with fury. "This is outrageous." He roared. "You're accusing us all, Poirot. I didn't forge anything, and I didn't kill Victor." Clara's voice trembled, her eyes darting to the door. "It's not me. I swear, Monsieur Poirot, I'm innocent." Miss Gray shrank back, her face pale, while Harrow stood rigid, his eyes fixed on the floor. The room crackled with tension. the truth teetering on the edge of revelation. Poirot's gaze swept over them, his mind racing, knowing a killer was close to breaking. Chapter 14. The confrontation in Whitechapel. The fog of London's Whitechapel district hung thick and heavy, cloaking the narrow streets in a ghostly veil that mirrored the mystery enveloping Ashbourne Manor. Hercule Poirot, his impeccable suit, a stark contrast to the grimy surroundings, stepped from a taxi outside a dingy boarding house, his cane tapping rhythmically on the cobblestones. The crimson veil, with its haunting jasmine scent, remained the heart of Victor Ashbourne's murder, its theatrical origins and tangled connections to the manor's inhabitants driving Poirot's relentless pursuit of the truth. His little gray cells were alight, weaving together the intricate clues. The cloaked figure at midnight, the heel mark, the threatening note signed C, the torn photograph of Clara with an unknown man, the cigarette case marked J.M., the love letter from Julian Moreau, the hidden ledger revealing Victor's blackmail, the veils linked to Madame Celeste, the typed threat to the dancer, the blood-stained glove with Reginald's fingerprints, and the forged document from the typewriter. The confrontation in the drawing-room had left the household on edge, but Julian Moreau's arrest in Whitechapel offered Poirot a chance to unravel the killer's identity. The typewriter's secret, revealed by its matching font and the forged document implicating Reginald, had heightened suspicions. Yet the smudged fingerprint on the threatening note suggested another hand. Clara's affair with Moreau, confirmed by the love letter, and her use of the typewriter pointed to her involvement. But Reginald's fingerprints on the blood-stained glove kept him in the frame. Miss Gray's observations of Clara's nervous typing and the glove in the laundry hinted at a conspiracy, possibly involving someone within the manor planting evidence. Moreau, now in custody, was the key to clarifying the veil's purpose and the cloaked figure's role. Poirot, accompanied by Inspector Dawes, entered the boarding house, determined to extract answers. The room where Moreau was held was cramped, its air thick with the smell of cheap tobacco and damp plaster. Moreau, a tall man with dark hair and a roguish charm, sat handcuffed at a rickety table, his eyes defiant despite his predicament. The gold watch, stolen from Victor's room, lay before him, its presence a silent accusation. "Monsieur Moreau," Poirot began, his voice calm but piercing, "you are a man of many secrets, non? You purchased a crimson veil, scented with jasmine, for Madame Clara Ashbourne, as your letter attests. You were seen near the manor the night of Victor Ashbourne's death, and your cigarette case, marked J.M., was found in the woods. Why did you come to Ashbourne, and what is your connection to the murder?" Moreau's smile was thin, his accent a blend of French and English. "Monsieur Poirot, you weave a fine tale, but I'm no murderer. Yes, I loved Clara, and I bought the veil as a gift, hoping to win her back. She ended our affair months ago, but I couldn't let go. I went to the manor to see her, but I never entered. I left the veil at the gate, a foolish gesture, and left." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mustache twitching. "A gesture, monsieur? Yet the veil was found in Victor's hand, and your cigarette case with a crimson thread was near the hidden passage. You spoke to Madame Celeste of righting a wrong. What wrong? And why flee to London?" Moreau's defiance faltered, his hands clenching. "The wrong was losing Clara. I thought the veil would remind her of our time together. But Victor, he knew about us. He met me in London, threatened to tell Reginald unless I paid him. I refused, and he laughed, said he'd ruin us both. I didn't kill him, Poirot. I was in the village at the Rose and Crown when he died." Dawes interjected, his tone gruff. "We've checked your alibi, Moreau. The innkeeper says you left the Rose and Crown before 11. Plenty of time to get to the manor and back. And that watch stolen from Victor's room. Explain that." Moreau's eyes darted to the watch, his voice low. I took it from Victor's coat in London a week before. He owed me money, and I thought it fair. But I wasn't at the manor that night. I swear it. Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. And the threatening note to Madame Celeste, typed, not written? It matches a typewriter in the manor where you were seen. Did you send it to silence her knowledge of the veil? Moreau shook his head, his voice rising. No, I spoke to Celeste. About the veil, yes, but I sent no threats. Someone's using me, Poirot, making me look guilty. Poirot nodded, filing away Moreau's words. His story was plausible, but the cigarette case and watch tied him to the crime scene. The typed threat suggested another hand, possibly Clara or Reginald, manipulating evidence. Poirot requested to search Moreau's belongings, and Dawes led him to a battered suitcase in the corner. Among the clothes and papers, Poirot found a small leather diary, its pages filled with Victor's handwriting, not Moreau's. The entries detailed Victor's schemes, debts, blackmail, and a cryptic note. C. Knows too much. Must act before R does. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, his heart racing. Victor's diary, hidden with Moreau. This K, is it Clara or another? And what did Victor plan to do? He flipped through the diary, finding an entry dated the day before the murder. Met J.M. in London. He refuses to pay. Clara denies him, but I know the truth. We'll confront R tonight. The diary confirmed Victor's knowledge of Clara's affair and his blackmail of Reginald, but it also suggested he suspected another C. Poirot tucked the diary into his pocket, its pages a treasure trove of motive and deceit. Returning to Moreau, Poirot held up the diary. This, monsieur, is Victor's diary, found among your things. It speaks of your meeting, his blackmail, and a mysterious C. How did you come by it? Moreau's eyes widened, his voice trembling. Victor gave it to me in London. Sighed. It was insurance, proof of his dealings. I kept it, thinking it might protect me if he turned on me. I didn't read it, Poirot, I swear. Poirot's mind churned. The diary confirmed Moreau's story, but its presence in his suitcase suggested he was either a pawn or a clever manipulator. The typed threat, the glove's fingerprints, and the veil's jasmine scent kept Clara and Reginald in the frame, but the diary's C hinted at another player. Poirot thanked Dawes and left the boarding house, arranging for Moreau to remain in custody until his alibi could be verified. Back at Ashbourne Manor, Poirot sought out Clara, finding her in the conservatory, her auburn hair loose, her lavender gown smudged with soil. Madame Clara, he said, producing the diary, I have questioned Julian Moreau, who claims you ended your affair. Yet Victor's diary speaks of your connection and a mysterious C. Did Victor confront you? Or was it Reginald he threatened? Clara's hand froze, an orchid snapping in her grasp. Victor's diary? I don't know what you're talking about, Monsieur Poirot. If Julian had it, he's lying to save himself. I told you our affair was over. Poirot's gaze was piercing. And yet, madame, the veil, the cigarette case, the love letter all point to you. If Victor knew of your affair, or of another C, it gives a motive for murder? None? Clara's voice rose, her eyes glistening. I'm innocent, Poirot. If Victor was blackmailing anyone, it was Reginald, not me. Ask him. Poirot sought out Reginald, finding him in his study, his face haggard, the typewriter still on the side table. Monsieur Reginald, he said, holding up the diary. Victor's diary reveals his blackmail of you and his knowledge of Clara's affair with Moreau. It mentions a C who knows too much. Is this Clara or another? And why did you hide this? Reginald's jaw tightened, his voice low. I never saw that diary, Poirot. Victor was a snake, blackmailing me over my debts. If he wrote about C, It's probably Clara. She's the one with secrets. Poirot nodded, unconvinced. A typewriter, monsieur, links you to the threat against Madame Celeste. The glove, your fingerprints. The diary, it tightens the noose. Reginald stood, his voice a growl. I'm no killer, Poirot. Someone's framing me Clara. Morale, maybe even that governess. Poirot sought Miss Grey, finding her in the schoolroom, correcting Beatrice's arithmetic. Mademoiselle Grey, he said softly, Victor's diary mentions a C who knows too much. Have you heard of such a person, perhaps in the household? Miss Grey's hands trembled. Her. Pencil dropping. No, monsieur, but Victor was always whispering about secrets. I thought he meant Clara, but he never said a name. As Poirot left the schoolroom, a servant approached, holding a telegram. For you, sir, just arrived from London. Poirot opened it, his eyes widening at the message. Moreau escaped custody. Last seen near King's Cross. Proceed with caution. The chapter closed with Poirot clutching the telegram, his heart pounding as he realized the killer's net was tightening. Moreau's escape was a dangerous twist, and the diary's secrets had raised the stakes. Poirot knew he must act swiftly, for the truth was slipping through his fingers like the fog outside.